for November 5th, 2014. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Mum?
Here.
Commissioner Roth?
Here.
Commissioner Pauley?
Here.
Mayor Neely?
Here. Could you please join me in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll step up in just a moment. We're honored today to have Miss Oregon with us, and I'll say a few words of why we are so honored. Rebecca, what school did you go to?
Which one?
What school district did you go to?
I went to Oregon City School District. I graduated from Oregon City.
So you graduated from Oregon City in 2009. And we're honored to have her be, I don't know how the voting occurs, but selected as Miss Oregon for this year. And we're extremely pleased. I'm going to give you a key to the city, but I want to talk about the two times I remember you when you were younger. Her dad, who's out here, Ted, we were in a group called the McLaughlin Promenade Task Force, I believe it was, and we were out there actually removing Scotch Boone from the area. Rebecca, I think you might have been, what, one?
If that.
If that. And she was patiently sitting in the stroller the whole time, no tears, no complaints. I thought it was unbelievable. You didn't drug her or anything, did you? Okay, but she was unbelievable. The second time I remember distinctly was she was several years older, but maybe still in elementary school. She, her sister Mariah, who actually competed, you competed in the same contest, correct? And you were Miss something too, weren't you? Miss Clackamas County. And did you guys tear your hair out when you were fighting for the same position? Oh, good. That's
No,
great.
I had to do her hair, so she shouldn't.
Anyway, we were sitting with her family, parents, and Malia, right? At the, did I get it right? Malia, I messed it up again. Yeah.
You'll get it.
I'll get it eventually. At a Phil Stocking Phil Hart bingo contest. And I had 4 cards in front of me, and I think I played the 15 times. I didn't win anything. Finally, I gave it up, gave 2 of the cards to Rebecca and 2 to Malia. And in the next 5 runs, they won 3 times. So those are my two memories of it. So representing you, the key of the city. I think I've only presented this. How many? This is the which time? The 4th time I made this presentation. So it's not a commonly given presentation. And if you find any place that opens up, please tell us. And what I would like to do, why don't you just stand up so everybody can see you, and too. And Sherry and Ted, would you stand up too? It's not a selfie, is it? No, I don't think it's a selfie.
No.
Yes, congratulations. And Princess Leia, right?
Yes.
Would you want to stand up? Thank you. And I believe part of your competition was a song, was it?
Yes. Yeah.
And do you remember it?
Of course I do.
Would you share it with us?
I would love to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Mayor Neely. So this song is actually the song that I did sing at Miss America just in September. So I hope that you enjoy. I've heard it said that people come into our lives for a reason, bringing something we must learn, and we are led to those that help us most to grow. I have been changed for good, and just to clear the air, I am for the things I've done you blamed me for. But then I guess we know there's blame to share, and none of it seems to matter anymore. As it passes aside, like a stream that moves over halfway through the woods. Who can say changed for the better? Because I knew you, I have been
I know you got a degree from my alma mater, Portland State, environmental science and a minor in sustainability, is that right?
Correct.
But you are going further with your education?
I am. So I'll be getting my second degree in atmospheric science at the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks next August.
They do have weather there, don't they?
We have a lot of it, and I have a lot of parkas, so we're good.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Rebecca.
you
I
very much,
appreciate it.
Mary Julie. Thank you.
We had an update of council activities from the medical counselor from Carlotta Colette. Unfortunately, she has laryngitis, and she called me on the phone. I didn't know who it was. I mean, it's a very severe case of laryngitis. So she won't be with us. I'm sure she'll be coming to a subsequent session to talk about that. And what I'd like to do is to read a proclamation in observance of Veterans Day, November 11th. Whereas the freedoms we enjoy as Americans have been purchased and maintained at a high price throughout our history, whereas honorable service performed in the defense of our nation is the highest form of citizenship, and whereas 2728 I have here, Oregon City employees, which is approximately 20% of the city workforce, are veterans or current members of the armed forces. And whereas the City of Oregon City is an employer supporter of the Guard and Reserve, and whereas at the state level, approximately 30,700 Oregonians have served in Iraq and Afghanistan since 9/11, whereas over 1,000 Oregonians remained deployed to Afghanistan, including a current Oregon police officer, and whereas 142, note 4 more since Valentine's Day, Oregon veterans have made the ultimate sacrifice when serving in Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts, and whereas in conjunction with Veterans Day observance of November 11, 2014, the City of Oregon City is proud to recognize the men and women who have served to protect our freedom. And whereas our hearts and thoughts go out to many killed in action or disabled while serving their country, now therefore I, Doug Neely, Mayor of Oregon City, do call upon all employees and citizens to observe Veterans Day with appropriate ceremonies in honor of those who have served to preserve the principles of justice and freedom and democracy. And I'll be signing this. I did want to make a couple of comments here. I lost my note, but I think I can remember. Patrick Lynch, I don't think this is it. Patrick Lynch, who has served, is it Sergeant? Yeah. Sergeant Patrick Lynch is now deployed in the in his fourth service in Afghanistan, and his service to the police department is tremendous. What he's learned in those things have served the police department well as well, and he is now on his fourth tour. We also had just one moment. Let's see if I can find my note. But we also had Tyrone Woods, who just recently was had his name placed in the Oregon Museum National Hall of the Oregon Museum of Military Museum National Hall of Fame. He was a Vietnam veteran who was killed in action in Vietnam. His sacrifice was actually jumping on a grenade to protect his fellow soldiers, and gave his life and saved others in the process. And then, Mr. Dahl, what's the first name? Larry Dahl, I'm sorry. Larry Dahl, who gave his life in Benghazi, made his own exception.
Tyrone Woods was in Benghazi, and
Well, I've got those switched. Yeah, I'm sorry. My apologies. Was in Benghazi, and he gave his life in the service of his country, and we've recognized Highway 213 in his name. So I wanted to recognize those three people that had recognition and been serving duty, that are were Oregon City citizens or employed by the city. With that, we're going to go on ahead to our ceremony, to our citizen comments. Any comments that you want to make are comments that are not items on the agenda, and you can have up to 3 minutes to speak on this. If you give your name and whether you're a citizen of Oregon City or not. I don't see anybody signed up, so we're going to go on to the. Come ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mayor. I prepared some comments prior to last night's, and so I'd had no idea who was going to win, but I just wanted to make some comments here. And it's specifically about a flyer that was put in most of the local papers. This is a flyer that specifically mentions Necedah, Roth, LaSalle, Berman, and having to do with Cabela's. And I don't want to rain on anybody's parade because we just went through an election, but I want to read my prepared comments. Before this election gets put to bed, something needs to be said about what I consider underhanded and deceitful smear campaign ad paid for by a so-called Friends of Oregon City. And I think we all know that the so-called Friends of Oregon City is probably just a front for a handful of individuals who we can already probably count on one hand. And I recall back to the first commission meeting after the citizens had been convinced to recall one of the other commissioners. And I recall a certain individual in our community sitting here at this very table and calling for healing and peace, and that we should move forward now as friends. But that was only after they had smeared and drugged through the mud a good representative of the people who simply asked the proper questions that any reliable commissioner would have or should have. I find it sanctimoniously ridiculous that this handful of individuals hiding behind a fictitious anonymous name continue to bring up the Rivers and Cabela's to attempt to tie anyone to a decision on the Rivers that never came to a vote. It smacks of a smear campaign that is deceitful. They should be ashamed, but are probably just the opposite, proud of their achievement to confuse the voting public. Even if a candidate was not directly responsible for this kind of deceiving campaign literature, they should be ashamed of any of their friends who are created and paid for this ad on their behalf. Bob LaSalle, who's mentioned in this, was not even involved at a neighborhood level, not even in the Park Place neighborhood at the time. He had no voice. He's on here. Mike Berman was just coming on to the Citizens Involvement Committee. He also had no voice in any decision pertaining to the Rivers. And Kathy Roth, it seems to many of us citizens that she was one of 9 members on an Urban Renewal Commission and only one of 5 member city commissions. One person, not even 2, can swing a vote. So I'm just wondering how many more years, how many more decades that this little handful of deceitful individuals is going to play the Rivers card and make everyone guilt by association. It's kind of like, quote, have you now or have you ever been a friend of Necedah, Roth, Walters, or anyone else alive on a commission during that time, unquote. So I plead with the City Commission at this point to clarify to the citizens once and for all, to clear up what truly happened with the Rivers decision. Why did it not come to a vote? And what were the real reasons behind the debacle? I think we all kind of know, we've all heard this story and that story, we didn't see the right papers and all that, but still, it's not really clear to the citizens, and they get really confused when they think people here listed are responsible, even though they weren't involved at that time. So maybe, just maybe, only then can this city ever put this behind us. We will always have the handful of deceitful and dishonest individuals who play underhanded politics with our city for the sake of big business profits. But taking that one joker out of the deck of what really happened might even the playing field at some point. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we'll go on to the adoption of the agenda. Does anybody want anything pulled? And I do. We've got a item, the last item, I believe, yes, on the consent agenda 8-9 that actually depends upon an action that is taken in under the
C6?
yeah, under C6.
And 8D. 8D. Yeah.
So I'd like to go ahead and have 8D follow 6C, because whatever decision might happen there may preclude even 8D being included. So that, any other anything else?
No.
Okay, so we'll go on then to the public hearings for the second reading of the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. We had this at our last meeting, passed with the first reading, and I'll just turn it over to Tony Conkle.
Thank you, Mayor. Evening, Commissioners. I'm here tonight to present the second reading of proposed ordinances approving the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, the creation of the multimodal mixed-use area, and adoption of the master plan, zone change, text amendment, comprehensive plan amendment, and amendments to the ancillary documents of the comprehensive plan. At the last meeting, you did unanimously approve the first reading of the ordinance, and you didn't, if you recall, you did leave the record open for additional public comment at the request of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association representative. So we will open that up for you to take that testimony tonight. We will be working with the attorney, and I think Mr. Sullivan has a couple things to add before we get started concerning how the process is, how we've gotten here, and what the rules we get to play by tonight are.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Commission, you recall that when we had this before you last time, I mentioned that this was, at least in part, a quasi-judicial determination, that the record was closed to any new evidence. I asked you then, and I will ask you again if anything's changed, is there anything that might prevent you from hearing this matter fairly? Do you have any economic interest? Is there any bias on the part of you towards anybody involved in this process?
No, but we have two members here that are part of the Legacy Partners group that have been involved in these actions, as Commissioner Poley and myself.
Right.
That won't create any bias.
Well, I asked you all that last week, and I wanted to find out if anything had changed since last week.
I attended a meeting this evening with the Heritage Coordinating Committee where this topic was brought up.
Okay, can you just briefly tell us what happened?
Several citizens that are speaking tonight were talking about the topic of adding buildings or discussing certain buildings that they think should be considered to be saved on our list.
All right.
But I didn't make any comments.
Okay. This is bleeding over to the second issue. Any ex-party contacts since the last meeting? Besides what Commissioner? All right. Does anybody want to question any of the commissioners on, well, Commissioner, about the comments just made? Hearing none, we can proceed on that point. Again, I want to emphasize that the record for new evidence is closed. You asked that this matter be held over for comment. And if advertently, someone attempts to present new evidence, I am confident that you will disregard that evidence. If somebody does present something in writing, I will probably ask them to show where this was presented in the record below. I want to keep this proceeding clean.
Good. Thank you.
I have a question.
In going back and looking at the planning commission meetings, it mentioned that there would be 3 hearings
3 hearings, what, before?
before us, before the commission.
I don't know.
And this is only the second.
We only have 2 readings.
We only have 2 readings.
Well, that was what was in that meeting.
Okay. Your process
where
only
the-
calls for 3. If you want to go for 3, you can do for 3. But,
I just want to make
We-
sure that the public
Sure.
gets their chance to.
sure.
We identified 3 potential hearing dates if they were necessary. We
Yeah.
didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first
Okay.
one was
All right.
identified as when the public testimony would be presented
That's
before
what I
the
said.
city commission, but we identified and held dates just in case we needed them because we didn't
Yeah.
know how the proceedings
Yeah.
were going to go. There was no guarantee that it would
No.
last 3.
No.
Okay. That will open for public comments.
And so before we get started real
Oh,
quick,
yeah, sure.
Councilor Collette, who was supposed to be here tonight to speak, had submitted an editorial that was in the Portland Tribune. She did ask, since she wasn't able to attend either of these city commission meetings, and she was pretty disappointed about that, to enter her commentary as her public comment
Yeah.
supporting the project, and as one of the partners throughout this whole process since the beginning of it. And as we talked quite a bit last time, as well as at the multiple hearings at the Planning Commission, and quite frankly, since the beginning of the public process concerning what do you want to see on this property in 30 years, a lot of discussion was held around the historic and cultural interpretation component of the 4 values that the Commission and the partners adopted when we started this process. And it was a main focus from day one. Prior to this, even the beginning of the land use and public engagement process, where we started off and we walked on the site and there was 600,000 square feet of buildings and structures and very densely developed site. And we went in and we broke out each and identified each individual building and tried to get an understanding of what that building was, when it was constructed, how it was constructed, and how it could be reused. And that initial work included George Kramer, a historian of over 20 years' experience on both sides of the falls, looking at it from the historical context. And he went in and worked with De Loretto Architecture, who came in and looked at what the reuse potential is of these buildings. And then we had KPFF, our structural engineers, in there looking at what it would take to get these buildings up to code to comply with seismic and modern building codes. None of these buildings were ever designed for retail or residential or office. They are industrial buildings, and a lot of them aren't even buildings. They're shells. They're made to protect equipment. And so out of that process, we came up with a scoring system, a plus or minus 3 that ranked them. Obviously, the higher the plus score, the more historically significant it was, or contributing, or more structurally sound the building was, or the repair to it could be much easier. And then the reuse potential. We like to point to the water filtration plant. Over 50 years old, historically significant, and probably one of the only buildings on the site that hasn't been manipulated in some manner. But what do you do with it other than use it as a water filtration plant? So it ranked low there. And so through that process, we started to identify buildings that made the most sense and had the highest likelihood and the most market likelihood of being reused. And those were identified as Mill O, Paper Machine 4, the D-Ink building, the Hawley building, and the Woolman Mill foundations. And those have been documented as conditions of approval as part of the master framework plan. We also identified secondary elements, and those included the Oregon City Flour Mill Foundation, the digesters, the Horton Sphere, or Sputnik as some refer to it, the boilers, and the number 1 paper machine adjacent to the Hawley building. So those five buildings and 5 elements have the highest protection through this process. If they want to be demolished or substantially changed, they need to go through the Type 3 land use decision, which is before the Planning Commission. And so just wanted to remind you how we worked through identifying the highest likelihood, the highest probability, the most significant buildings on the site. Not to say that as the developer works through this process and identifies other resources or has other ideas about other buildings that he could not move forward with those as well. but those were the ones that rose to the top on multiple levels and were the highest supported as we moved through the project. So just wanted to remind folks of some of that discussion that has gone on for a fairly long time and how we came to that list that you see in the conditions of approval. So with that, that's all I have at this moment.
That will open for comments from the public. If you actually are representing a group, if you, besides your name, go ahead and indicate the group that you represent. Damon, maybe William Beckard, will you come forward, please?
Actually, Denise and I should be on the same thing.
Okay, that's fine.
While they're making their way up, Mr. Mayor, I did read Councillor Collette's material. It's purely argument.
Yeah.
Where's our copies?
Who's starting?
Well, wait a
I
minute.
may want to wait.
We're giving her a minute.
Yeah, we're waiting for a minute.
Attorney, have the letter.
We got written material being passed out.
Yep.
I gave that to you.
Oh, give me this.
Oh, I gave you the color copy of it. Okay. Hang on just a second. He asked me if I had something.
And just for the record, we're speaking for the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association land use comments, so
Okay.
I think that gives us 5 whole minutes. And then the 3 for me as an ordinary citizen. So we'll be here for about an hour.
Okay. Just give us one more second. Don't start the timer yet, please.
Sorry, I'm doing my best.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
I didn't see. Good evening. While you're getting your material, I'm Denise McGriff, and I am an officer in the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, as is Damon, and we are representing the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. We want to thank you for the opportunity to submit some comments to you regarding the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, and once again, we want to also add McLaughlin's voice to the thanks to all the partners, but more particularly to you all and city staff. And I want to particularly compliment the city staff for all the work that they have done and everything that they have slogged through, all the tours they gave, truly extraordinary, and I know they've been thanked many times, but it doesn't hurt to thank them again. And I also thank the Commission for their leadership on this. I don't think that any other jurisdiction has had such a fabulous opportunity and a challenging project like this one, and we are going to make this very successful, as I know we all will. So I'm going to turn this over to Damon. We had a meeting recently where we had discussed this particular issue, and we are submitting to you our comments. All the material that you have before you was either submitted at the Planning Commission hearing or as part of the very large voluminous record, which I'm sure you all slogged through just like many of us did.
Could I ask
Yes,
just
sir.
one question? You're talking about a meeting, was it the steering committee?
Yes.
We met with the Neighborhood Association members and steering committee members.
Thank
Yes. Yeah, and that is stated in the memo.
Good evening. My name is Damon Mabey, for the record, McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. You should have basically, there it is,
Yep.
3 documents in front of you. One is our letter, and I'm not going to read it because that's just a waste of time. You are all literate. But I will summarize it, and that is that basically we believe that the Polari building and paper machine number 3 should be included in condition of approval 6, which is the second tier. Not the first tier, but the second tier. We believe that they're both historically significant and that they both have a useful life as a public asset. The second chunk of documents is shows your framework plan map, and it has little light gray boxes to show where the buildings are. So in order to make it easier for you to see, because it took me forever to do it, we outlined the Polari and machine number 3. And you can see that, although they come out kind of yellow on this, they're both basically located in what's designated as public access areas. And so we think that it's important that the public, can maintain access to them. They can be a river walk, they can be a bandstand, whatever. The third, and then we have some photographs from Blue Heron Beginnings that show Mill 3 And the first one just shows it from the riverside, and it goes all the way down. The next few are actually the ones I'm more impressed with. It shows the riverfront and how they were on pilings and there, water spilled underneath them, and how that could be a real asset. I mean, I can imagine sitting on, exercise equipment or in a dining thing and watching the river go by. The next two are showing the building with, the different roof that it currently has. It has a square roof now. It used to have an angled roof.
Pitch roof.
And that's a really, really hard one to see, but that's
Yeah.
basically the same thing. And this is the interior of the carpentry shop / pullery. And
That's one, we don't have that, or is it blown
should-
up?
it's the very last. Yeah.
And that was in the other documents as
Yeah,
well.
these are all in,
Apparently missing all the...
and, we want to show that the interior of that space is huge. It has a lot of potential for, as we said in our letter, maybe Pendleton Woolen Mill coming and doing some sort of demonstration project, or just being a retail space, or whatever. What the current plan has is a big, huge green square. That's, wow, more grass. But if it had a building that could be utilized to make people want to come to that green square, then, that has some value to it. The last document is from the building assessment that was done under the PGE FERC licensing. And first page is Mill O, which is on the must-be-saved Tier 1 list. And the second page is the Pullery, which is called the Carpentry Shop. And with the exception of its historic value, it has the same structural and reuse numbers as the building we've already decided to save. And we believe that basically this building was misidentified. It's identified as a carpentry shop. That completely ignores its first 60 years of life as part of the woolen mills. And so because of that, we think those numbers, those historic value numbers should grow significantly, and it would put it on the saving. We're not asking for these to be Tier 1, save them or else. We think they need to be evaluated and then put to good use for the public. I would like to say I'm a member of the Planning Commission. I did not make this argument when I was on the Planning Commission, and for the very simple reason that I didn't have the discussions with the interested parties that I had afterward. I was basically afraid of ex parte contact contamination. Now I could have it, so I had it. And this information was finally presented to me in a way that showed.
So is this new information then?
No,
'Cause it wasn't
it's all
before-
information that's there. It's
This is
just
the record.
pointed at in a different way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, we were very careful to make sure. The only new thing is the two building outlines on this piece of paper.
Okay.
But that's not
Because you
new.
both are on the planning commission, I assumed you would
Yeah,
not.
so from that aspect, we believe the historic value of those two buildings merits their attention. We believe their location in public spaces merits their salvage, because once they're gone, they're gone. And there's a lot of potential adaptive reuses that can be for them. Another reason we're going for Tier 2 rather than Tier 1 is because that gives the most flexibility in how it's reused. We're not saying you must rebuild this as a pullery and have people ripping wool off of land. No. It needs to be a good building,
Right.
for use. And they're in the public right-of-way. If you restore the bank to the way it shows in the earlier pictures, you can't have the Riverwalk go in front of the building.
Yeah.
So that means it would go behind or through
Or
to
through.
include,
Mhm.
whatever resources we want to put in it.
A lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
So-
So that's our point. SHPO wanted those buildings saved along with several others. And there's a letter in your record to that effect. We're trying to be focused and very legitimate on what our concerns are, and it's those two buildings. And we think it is not an imposition or a breach of flexibility
Yeah.
for those two buildings to be added to Condition 6, which is the Tier 2 list.
Great.
So thank you very much for listening to us. We had a lot of people in the neighborhood who slogged through a lot of that material, which I'm as someone who's been involved,
Yeah.
I'm very impressed that people
Yeah.
were that interested in our neighborhood to go through this and review this and give us their comments so that we could present this here tonight. So our conclusion, again, is that we concur with the recommendation that the Planning Commission submitted to you with with the addition. So thank you very much. Do you have any questions for us?
That was good information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
Mr. Mayor, before they leave, I
Yes.
just want to make sure the letter appears to be argument, and the material seems to be based on material that was already in the record and not new stuff.
Right.
And both of the speakers
were-
are affirmatively stating.
We
Yeah.
were very careful.
Yeah, that's what I knew you guys would be, but I just wanted it on the record, how good you guys are.
Ed Sullivan was sitting on my shoulder. Or the angel of Ed Sullivan was sitting on my shoulder.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be rude, but I'm leaving because I'm fighting a toothache.
Oh, thank you very much, and thanks for serving on Planning Commission. I know that's a lot of work for you guys to do.
Will we
I
reserve any
appreciate it.
Doing it for you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys very
We'll
much.
reserve any discussion until after we've heard everybody. William Becker and Michael Berman.
Good evening, and thank you, everybody. William Becker, Oregon City, and I also want to thank the Commission and the Planning Commission and everybody else who's worked so hard on this. I'm excited about the possibilities, and I've participated in some of the discussion early on at different phases, and a lot of the discussion on interpretation, historic interpretation, but also historic preservation early on was a major focus for a lot of us. I know that several letters have been sent from or different organizations. The board of the OC Farmers Market, I know, has sent you a letter supporting including the Pullery for consideration as one of the buildings in level 1 or level 2. The McLaughlin neighborhood just presented. The Willamette Falls Heritage Foundation has also submitted a letter supporting 5 buildings: the Woolen Mills Pullery, the number 3 paper machine, the Mill D warehouse, number 4 paper machine warehouse, and Mill C. And the Two Rivers neighborhood voted to adopt the Willamette Falls Heritage Foundation's recommendations. I don't know if that letter ever got out or not. I haven't received a copy, but I would encourage you to consider those, especially the Mill C, the Pullery, and the number 3 paper machine. Those seem to be the most historic. And my understanding is that the Pullery building is actually the oldest building left on that site. And even if some of these buildings can't be used for an office building or a shop or something, they can be used for historic demonstrations. They can be used for shelters in a lot of different kinds of ways. There are a lot of uses that would fit the idea of both historic preservation and historic interpretation. And I've seen the maps. They don't look like they would be very intrusive into the financial areas or the walkway areas that are included now. That wouldn't be a major piece. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Michael Berman. I'm speaking on behalf, well, I'm not going to say I'm speaking on behalf. I was at our last Two Rivers neighborhood meeting, and the discussion was made, and the McLaughlin neighborhood recommendation was looked at. Also, the Willamette Heritage October 4 letter that I believe is already on record, and a motion was made at the Two River neighborhood that I was at and voted on. And the motion was made to endorse not only the body of the letter of the McLaughlin neighborhood and their recommendations for the 2 buildings, but also the October 4 letter from the Willamette Heritage letter, and to endorse that letter in its entirety. And I thought that either Brian Boyce, who's our chair, or Jerry Herman would be here tonight, and they're not here, so I am speaking that I was at the meeting. I'm not speaking on their behalf, but I was at the meeting when the vote was taken, and just reiterating. And I'm not sure that if that letter would be submitted at a later time, if that would be admitted for, since the letter was voted on at our last October meeting.
Right.
If you continue the hearing, the letter could be
Okay.
Okay. And I'm just putting a personal vote in for machine number 3 as well. My dad worked on that paper machine, and number 2 and number 1 for 41 years. And I do think that removing buildings in a zone that a building could not be rebuilt at because of current zoning is something to be thought of and to preserve it. I remember our first, when it first started out, I think one of the 4 tenets was historic preservation, and then it was changed to historic interpretation. And I understand things change, but I do remember initially one of the 4 tenets was historic preservation. And that's all I have. And thank you so much for all the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Mahoney.
Good evening. My name is Bob Mahoney. I live in Oregon City. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Planning Commission, just a few observations that I've made myself, and I think Rocky and I've talked about this before, about the aspect of public art on the access itself, over which we have control. The preservation of historic buildings, or as they're identified, I get the feeling way down deep that we don't have absolute positively express control over how that's going to turn out, because it's down the road a bit. But the public access is going to be one of the immediate improvements on the site. And as such, I think we have the opportunity to refer to the past and apply whatever historic interpretation we as a community have regarding the past, i.e. The pioneers, the American Indian use of that land, and various artifacts that are found along the way that we can make as statues and things of this nature, and maybe a wall of identifying all the names of people that have contributed to the development of Oregon and the Oregon Territory, and obviously Dr. John. I mean, you're not going to leave him out, but somewhere we can slip Doug in there. But I think that if we don't do this, and with the opportunity that we have, well, shame on us for not taking advantage of this, because we have so many partners involved with the state and Metro and the county and whatever. There's plenty of artwork to be located on that site, which would really identify the history of the site to people outside the state that have no idea. They're coming here to learn. Well, let's give them something to learn about. So those are my comments, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on the planning commission.
Yes. Jesse Bus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Jesse Buss on behalf of myself. I just wanted to supplement the Neighborhood Association testimony regarding the 2 additional buildings. While I agree that there be no downside to adding those 2 buildings to the Tier 2, in that there still remain flexibility, there won't be these demands for review at the Planning Commission. What it would add is a benefit to the owner and to everybody in the form of potential eligibility for grants, both private and federal. When you apply for grants, they often want to see, why do you care about this building? Why do you want this money from us? And if we can point to a planning document, especially master plan, identifying these 2 buildings and all the other ones on there as Tier 2 historic, of Tier 2 historic importance, that will carry some weight. If they're not listed anywhere on there, they're unlikely to give money. And if the owner decides not to move forward, then that's his decision. But that would be the concrete benefit to adding it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Give staff a chance to respond, and then we'll have our discussion, if you have anything to respond to.
I think just to clarify that the proposal is to add it to condition of approval number 6. That would actually require review by the Planning Commission to do anything, so it's not that adding this list would have no impact. It would. If I could just read real quick about the carpenter shop, or the Pullery, as folks are referring to it. And this was based on the review that we had done with Mr. Kramer, KPFF, and Dealer of Architecture. And while some interior structural character remains, the exterior has been completely modified, obscuring its original design and limiting its historical integrity. In its entirety, or just through salvage materials, portions of the carpenter shop could support the mellow rehab scenario. However, the carpenter shop is not considered sufficiently intact to qualify as historic. Its location adds to the complexity of the site. However, it lacks a visual integrity on the exterior, does not support or reflect its historic character. The structure does not have a recognized lateral force resisting system and would not be able to resist code-required seismic forces. I don't disagree that this is one of the oldest wood structures on the property, but it is in very poor shape. So to elevate it to the standard of where the other ones are, they're not in the same class based on the multiple looks that we've had at it. Paper Machine 3 is a little bit more difficult. Most of you probably remember, as we walk through the site, most of that building has been removed or cut into. Essentially, you have steel post with siding around it. Some of the pictures that you saw tonight, they don't exist. Some of the basement's still there. We've walked down into the basement, and most of you have. So it's another one that's been severely altered, and was another one of the reasons it scored very low on the reuse potential, as well as the engineering of that building that would have to occur. It was down in the -2.5 to 3, -2.5 to 3, when looked at by KPFF. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to Christina.
Thank you, Tony. I wanted to give a little bit of context to how Walker Macy viewed a lot of this base data, because this report, the large 200-page structural report, came out when the partners were thinking of potentially purchasing the site, and this was kind of through that lens. And so I'm really happy how we did that 3-part scoring system, because I think it really kind of distilled, and a number of buildings rose to the top and another number of buildings sunk, and then there were kind of these middle buildings. And when we went into the Walker Macy process, we kind of said, well, we know the black and whites, but here's some of this gray ones. And the Carpentry/Pullery was a gray one. The whole number 2-3 complex with the warehouse was another gray one. And as we worked with Walker Macy, through their urban design lens, kind of think of this as very good data that kind of went through the lens of the public process and the expertise of the Walker Macy consultant team. And they saw a lot of problems with looking at the number 2-3 site. And that back we talked about a little bit the hens and the chicks. Well, the good part of the site that had the highest amount of structural integrity was the warehouse right up front. Actually, the number 3 part was the most complicated. If you add that and the number 2, so the whole thing is just a massive integrated complex that some areas are really high, some areas are low. Part is in the floodplain, and has, of course, the Oregon City Flour Mill Foundation underneath, which we did identify. And so what Walker Macy's recommendation really was, this was such a complicated area, and as after we were trying to reach that balance of certainty and flexibility, this is when they really felt that the owner needed to address through market conditions, because we really could not identify a specific path for it. The Carpentry building/Pullery was identified. We knew the woolen mill history, but the complexity of the structural integrity of the second floor, the water intrusion, as well as the whole ground floor is completely in the floodplain. So adding all of that in, they really, once again, that kind of those middle buildings, they recommend not putting it in and letting the market determine kind of the next steps, because it was so complicated. What they really did say, what came out, it wasn't just the ranking of a building, it was how does it tell the story, especially for the pedestrian and the urban design of the site. And to them, one of the highest value buildings was the number 4 Paper Machine and D Inc. because saving those really allowed you to keep the large industrial mass and feeling of the site. And to them, they wanted more energy put into those buildings, which also have their own structural problems. So you're looking at all these different buildings, and they all of them have pluses and minuses and structural upgrades. They said, if we're working with a new owner, this is going to have the most impact on the community's understanding of this being a former industrial place, is that massing. It also will help as infill comes in. And so that's kind of, this report also went through this lens of working with Matt Brown with Loci, looking at the market rate, working with our habitat, understanding what could be done along the Willamette River, and our urban design team at Walker Macy. So it went through that lens, and so that's where we are, why those buildings were not put in. And so I just want to kind of give that as a little bit of background. The other one I want to give a little background to was the SHPO letter, and I don't know if it was completely explained why that SHPO letter was always involved in our packet. From the very beginning, we didn't know who was going to own it, but we knew that we needed to get ahead of understanding the historic significance of the site and how, especially if future federal money was used, how we documented our process. So very early on, we went to the SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, took the existing George Kamer report, added buildings that are now over 50 years old, and then went to the State Historic Preservation Office and said, this is our recommendation of buildings that are potentially eligible for National Register listing. And that's what the State Historic Preservation Office does. They look at potential eligibility. And that is one of those requirements in a future process for federal funding. You need to know what your playing field. Doesn't mean that it's guaranteed it could be listed, but you keep the bar low and say potential. And that's kind of where that list came from. And so that, once again, that's another piece of data we used, and we've been working collaboratively to understand how that identification will work, and as we kind of go through this long-term process, especially relating to the Riverwalk, because we know most likely federal monies will be used for that. So that was just a little background information on how those two pieces of the puzzle kind of fit.
I'd like to ask you, were these Commissioner Mabey discussed ex parte contact, but in fact, anybody could make presentations at the Planning Commission. Were these arguments for these sites actually put forward at the Planning Commission?
I believe both buildings were requested along with other buildings, and I think we had a lot of the same comments back, and we included, it is 200 and something page document, so we printed out a lot of these forms and put them in as a separate kind of double and entered them into the record, and we talked a little bit about it. But I just wanted to give a little bit more context of it. It was both the pre-work we did and the work that we did through this public visioning process that kind of got us where we were at the Planning Commission.
What's the current name of SHPO? They call themselves something else now, right?
What's the name of SHPO now?
Oh, no, it's the State Historic Preservation Office.
Okay. Is it
HPLO changed, didn't it?
Oh, you're thinking of Restore Oregon. That is a private nonprofit.
Okay, that's a different one. Okay. Okay, let's do our attorney a bit.
Okay. If I understand the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association correctly, their focus is on a couple of particular buildings that they would like you to change the status of as part of the conditions of approval in 14-1016. You have the ability to do that if you wish.
You don't have to go back to the Planning Commission.
Well, we'll have to talk about the process,
Okay.
exactly. But if you do that, at least you're going to have to amend the ordinance. That means you'll have to amend it tonight, and you'll have to hold it over for another meeting. All right? So bear that in mind, and that's fine. You can do that. Again, if I can have the planner's attention for just a sec. What I also understand is that the approach taken by the staff and the Planning Commission was not to do anything in particular on the historic buildings so as to amend the inventory.
Correct.
And to leave that for the development process. You are not required to amend the inventory at this time. There's no obligation to do that. So what you have before you is a straight decision on whether or not you want to put these two buildings and elevate their status from where they were. in the existing conditions. You have the right to do that, but again, we have to talk about amending, and I will have to talk to staff if you are of that mind about whether this has to go back to the Planning Commission. So I guess you might want to talk among yourselves to figure out whether or not you want to consider a change from the ordinance that was that received first reading at your last meeting. If you do want to make that change, I will have that conversation with staff, and I will be back to you in 5 or 10 minutes.
We could perhaps say that we're not certain we want to make that change and ask what is involved in the process.
All right, and then Tony perhaps could respond to that as to why he believes this has to go back to the Planning Commission.
Well, we have no justification for it, additional findings. I guess you have a 7-0 recommendation to move forward with the condition as it was proposed based on very similar information that you've received here tonight.
Right.
And if I understand Mr. Conkle correctly, if you did make the change, we'll also have to make some findings to justify the addition of these two buildings from the base that you had at the last meeting, base ordinance.
The historical interpretation, I think, is really important. What I'd like to see is, in part, be it artwork or be it some other presentation, where probably on a decade basis we can see pictures of what that site looked like, the various buildings, and it's a whole evolution process. I mean, there are many buildings that preceded these, and these they don't exist anymore. But we've seen renderings of many of that, and I think we can come up with a process that actually gives that kind of interpretation over time, probably indicating every structure that was there that we can historically find that existed, starting with the first sawmill completed in 1833, I believe it was. But in any case, that would be one way of dealing with all of the structures that are currently, portions of it are still here, but also entities that no longer exist. And that might be one mechanism of dealing with a lot of the concerns here.
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking for people to hit the button. Probably I should hit the button, but I didn't. Commissioner Smith.
If anyone up here is going to, kind of convey an interest in keeping buildings, it's me.
Absolutely.
And I've been, weighing this, very high in the last couple meetings. And so, I was very much waiting to hear from the rest of the commission, because I think I'm at one end of the spectrum. But I also believe the important balance that is here, I think what put that in perspective a little bit for me at the last meeting is how many buildings have already been gone. How many buildings are completely gone that we talk about. I walk down Main Street frequently, showing people the downtown and point out buildings that are no longer there on our current Main Street. We think about how many buildings on Main Street are actually designated historic buildings. There's not many. So I care very much about saving as many buildings as we can, because once they're gone, they're gone. And but at the same time, that land is extremely valuable. We have to, rate these. I think the job that has been done by multiple, through many different ways, rating these buildings. I think that process was a good process. I think that process is a process that we should all feel pretty comfortable with. and then we hear from Tony some of these specific buildings, which I actually had to go, some of these buildings I couldn't get pictured in my mind until I actually saw some of the things tonight again. So it's been a tough one for me because I think that we really have to weigh that space, what buildings can be saved, how many buildings on that property take up space that something else can go. And all these things have to be considered. I think we've all done a very, very good job of that. Are there more things that should be on the list? Are there more things that should be saved? Yes, and because that doesn't mean they're not going to be saved, that they're not on the list.
Yeah.
And I understand there's more likelihood that they're going to be saved if they're on the list. But there's so many variables in what could come. Part of the greatness of this plan is it's general enough because we don't know what's coming. We don't know what's coming to this city to build on that property. And how can we go into specific details of every single piece of this until we know that? And so we have to be that flexible, and there may be something that comes in for a particular block that fits the historic past of that block and says, wow, we really want to save this. And that's possible. And I think that I feel better about that happening now than I did 20 years ago, because we have people coming to Oregon City, spending money on their downtown buildings to do exactly what none of these owners have to do this. So we think about how many, the Liberty Theater is one that I like to go on and on about. Thanks to the county, it's gone, right? So there was this comments 20 years ago saying, well, who's going to come to Oregon City and spend $2 million to save a building? So let's just tear it down, which is what happened. And now here we are 20 years later, and that's exactly what's happening. People are coming to Oregon City. They're spending millions of dollars to fix up historic buildings. So, I think as much recognition as we can give to these buildings that are still on that property is important, because I think there's that expectation from this community, even if it's not on the list, to save these buildings. And I do like, I agree with most of the organizations tonight that say put these buildings on the list, but at the same time, think about the climate has changed there in this city, that and the people that are coming into this city because of its unique, important heritage. I think we're in a better position now than we've ever been, because there is a community who wants these developers that are coming into the city to protect this history, to save it. But we also have to be flexible enough to know when it's too much. And I'm really struggling with that. I feel comfortable where we're at, but that's saying, well, and partly because, we didn't think we'd be sitting here. I mean, we've had so many possibilities where some of these things could have fell apart. And I think I kind of feel the same way when we talk about some other projects in this town. Any hesitation to stop and hold it up again and hold it up again worries me for something so major as this. Since I know that everyone on this commission is waiting for me to talk about history, while I was sitting here waiting to hear from them, because I feel like I've come, I think I'm kind of on this opposite end where I could say, I would love to see every single building on this property listed. But it's not realistic. It's not realistic, and nor does it move forward a project that is bigger than anything that any of us have ever seen in this city in our lifetimes. And so you have to kind of put all that together. And so I was waiting to hear from you to move forward. I appreciate all the comments, and I think that in itself shows the true importance that this community has to its heritage. But I think I feel comfortable where we're at. I would like to hear from the rest of the commission on what they feel about that, because I definitely would support any other possibilities, but
I was going to say, probably most of us were waiting for you.
I know that.
Mr. Mayor, in response to your comment earlier about the interpretive value of telling the story of what went there, and certainly there are buildings there, there are uses there that have come and gone and aren't there anymore.
Right.
But you still have buildings that are there, and so we do have two conditions that I'd like to point out. Prior to the demolition of any structure identified as potentially eligible for listing on the National Register, the applicant shall submit an intensive level survey following the guidelines set forth by the Oregon State Historic Preservation Office. Prior to the demolition of structures not identified as eligible for the National Register or not 50 years old, the applicant shall submit a reconnaissance level survey, which shall include a minimum photos of all interior floors. So, for what's there now,
yeah,
you're going to start to get that story told.
Yeah.
And this is, through those conditions, you start to collect that information, those pictures, and then you would be able to build on that. So I just wanted to point out that is contemplated, that we don't want to lose the story of what's here, as some of these minor buildings are potentially removed. And so there is a mechanism to catch that, what's there, document it, and then use it as we see fit in the future.
What is the process in the future? One of these buildings that doesn't quite make the list,
okay,
right? And you were just speaking about that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not possible to just go in there and knock it down without some process.
So if it's not one of the buildings that we identified,
right?
Okay. Removal of elements not identified for retention will be processed as a Type 1 land use application, provided all conditions of approval for the master plan have been met. So really, that's a come in and you go through the documentation process with staff. And so depending on the age of that building, it would be either a reconnaissance level survey or an intensive level survey. So that's what we would be getting. But they would come in, essentially document this building, work with us to document what we need, and then that building could be removed through the demolition permit because it's not on this list.
My vision has kind of changed in terms of what could happen. I could visualize a holographic image of the falls pre-Western settlement, and you can just see a holographic change over time as buildings came and went.
You're getting really artistic.
Well, that's all right.
Wow, jeez.
Some building that's built 50 years from now may disappear in 150, and that's still part of a holographic image of how things are changing, and perhaps identify all buildings that we know existed. We probably don't know them all, but we probably know a lot of them that we could do. And I imagine there are funding sources that we could identify once people see the magnitude and importance of this project, that we'd be able to do something like that.
Well, I think part of what makes downtown such a great place is it's layers upon layers upon layers. And that in itself is part of the history of this community. So saying that some of these buildings are, the ones that are, worth saving, that honestly could have gone at really any time over the last, 100 years. We're saving those. But what we're doing is what has always happened on that property for, the entire history of this state, which is continue to evolve as the community evolves, building new things. And so I think to some degree that in itself pays honor to that history by integrating the new and the old.
I agree.
So, I hear a motion.
Wait, is that, are you?
They're still talking, I think.
Who's talking?
Kathy's on there, I think, and I
Oh,
don't
she?
know.
Oh, she just came up. She wasn't there just a moment. Yes, Kathy.
Okay, I have some comments, and number one is I don't want us to be short-sighted on this. Once something's gone, we can't get it back.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd also like to take a little bit broader point of view in that if we stay within the continental United States, but look at other places. I don't know how many of you have been to the Peters Ski Round Barn over in Eastern Oregon. That was in terrible shape. I don't think you could argue that this structure is any worse shape than that was, but it was saved, it was preserved. And we can't ever go back if we get rid of it. We can't go back and preserve it again. Another example is the Ermatinger House. We started digging into that and found it was worse than we ever imagined. And not only that, we've spent the time to get the extra money to take it back to its original form. So that is something that's possible with these buildings. So I think that not putting them on a list for, consideration of preservation is something that we'd be remiss in doing our job if we didn't do that.
I'll speak again.
Anybody else? Carol?
Sure. So,
Sorry. I don't have to speak all the time.
So just because it's on the list doesn't mean that it will be saved automatically. They'd have to go through a much harder process. And just because it's not on the list doesn't mean it's not going to be saved. I think the important thing here is all the documentation and all the historical work that's been done and all the historical work that still has to be done before demolition. So I feel comfortable with that, and I agree with Rocky. The site has changed, and I'd like to keep all the buildings too, but I realize that's not realistic. So I'd like to see it move on and develop into something vital and have access again and open that gate and move on.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
In response to that is, I don't want us to rush through this process. And moving on is something that, sure, we could get excited and say, oh, we're going to get moving next week on a shopping mall down there. But that would be totally irresponsible of every one of us to do something like that just to expedite the process.
Mr. Moon.
Sorry, I wanted to hear what everybody had to say. And great comments from McLaughlin neighborhood. Where I come from, we have been discussing this project for a little over a year. Is that correct? I think that everybody involved has known about the historic buildings down there, their significance, it's important. I don't know, but I've heard that we have a developer who actually owns the property and is willing to work with us for the riverfront, and I appreciate that. I don't want to tie their hands too, but I hopefully understand that they are going to be respectful of our history. And I don't want to slow down the process. We have been discussing this for a very long time. We've gone through a lot of meetings. I would like to see it move forward this evening.
I'll just use the Ermatinger as an example. I'll call her a philanthropist, but she purchased buildings.
Yep.
The Ermatinger turned out to be based on city-owned property. The heirs weren't interested in the building, and the city went ahead and obtained it. The point is, there are ways you can save the other buildings. You can have somebody that will buy it from the developer and will invest in it and bring it back. This is not the only mechanism that exists.
Correct.
This is not going to be a fast project.
No.
This thing is not going to be demolished in 3 years and something built. I don't think we're going to see a whole lot happen until, frankly, certain areas it's going to development can happen, maybe in the front end. I don't know, but I think we're going to see a whole lot happening until we, in fact, have the public access there.
Yeah.
So this is not anything that's rushed. I mean, we're passing this master plan, but the actual development process is going to be many, many years in coming. We might find areas of Main Street move faster than what happens there at the site because of the public access. So we're not rushing a development process. We're putting forward a master plan, and that master plan is something that will be implemented over a rather extended period of time. It's not going to be rapid.
One last comment that I would make, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I give a lot of weight to what our planning commission also does. I know that our planning commission digs into all of these plans and projects, and they do an awesome job. So I also weigh the fact that it was a 7-0 and they had all this evidence before them. So I think that it's been vetted, and I think our partners and the developer I think we're going to work together, and it's all going to be a great project.
Has this been vetted with the developer?
Has what been vetted?
These two buildings?
They've been involved in the review process in terms of
the
we
entire-
didn't speak specifically about these two buildings.
Okay.
McLaughlin
But
presented
they
this
have
for
all
the
the
first time. They
evidence.
have all the evidence.
Yeah,
They have
okay.
all the work we've done to date.
Mayor, if I may, you, I think, pointed out the distinction between a site plan, which this isn't. It's easy to get into that area
Yeah.
from this area. It's kind of a seamless transition,
Right.
but they're very distinct, and
Right.
I know all of you recognize that. One of the things that I think is critically important, and I believe that the site is frankly more economically valuable to the developer or any potential developer if the story, the cultural and historic interpretation that is among the four values, the four core values that underpin this entire project, and also, I might add, underpin a significant public financial contribution to the Riverwalk that's going to happen, which also the property owner has an extreme interest in. That story, if that story is somehow lost, there's going to be demolition down there. You can't have renewal without some demolition, and we have these four key buildings that are screaming out for being salvaged and repurposed and telling their structure, themselves telling a story. But if the story is lost, some of the economic viability of the site is diminished. And so I'm convinced that having that as one of your foundation for critical values in this plan, underpinning this plan, and also having that tied to some of the financial incentives that the public may bring to bear in terms of resources, I think that story is going to be preserved, and it needs to be. And whether, if we somehow ended up with a recalcitrant landowner, which we don't have at the moment, but if we somehow ended up in that situation, on the public access piece that we are negotiating for on an easement for access now for the public, that story is going to be told there too. And at every step of the way, I mean, there's a journey there to be told that's thousands of years old, not just the lifespan of these buildings. And so that's got to be a big focus of the project moving forward in both the public sector expenditures as well as the private sector.
Mr. Smith.
I'm having a tough time still. So one of the things that I think is, what the city manager just kind of alluded to as well, is the stories that are there on the mill site. Many of them haven't been told for many, many years. And so when we call out, certain buildings on this property, most of us in this room know them because we've been on the site, we've been through it. Most of the community does not know that the specificity of these particular buildings, these sites, because no one's out there. If we get people out onto this site, which is what we are trying to do, what we are working so hard with all these partners to do. I remember, some of the buildings we've lost in this town because no one was standing there telling their story and no one was advocating for them. When we get people on this site People understand the importance of these buildings. I think that's going to educate the public enough too, especially in some of these buildings that right now are just almost unsavable. But once people get out there, maybe, the public has a lot of power. And if bulldozers are coming down the street and there's buildings there that people want to save, they'll be saved. If there's that much interest in it. But how do we tell the stories of these buildings with not being able to get people out there, not be able to plan for a site that has the flexibility enough to move forward with the partners that we've spent so much time working on, so that we can even have that dialogue, or even potentially get to a place where we can move on to a project that we've all dreamed about our entire lives in this city. The community has an incredible amount of power. If I can't believe if someone is knocking down a building on that mill site to build something that the community wants, there's not going to be an uproar. I think whoever's sitting up here at that time, or in the city staff at that time, are going to have to answer those questions. If the majority of the commission tonight wanted to add these to the list, I would be more than willing to do that. But I feel comfortable with the process. I feel comfortable with what this commission, the majority of this commission feels, and I feel good about it. Am I struggling a little bit with it? Yes. But I think there's so many aspects of this project where you have to work together, you have to move forward, or else we wouldn't be where we're at. I've said so much anyway. This is our second reading.
You can make a motion for the second reading and final adoption. You can make a motion for continuance.
I'm going to make a motion for second reading and final adoption.
It's the first of the two ordinances, 1015,
Yes.
right? Are you ready for me to read it?
Well, there's
Did
not
we get a second yet?
Oh, sorry,
Second.
Sorry, duh.
Commissioner Smith, seconds.
This is ordinance number 14-1015, an ordinance adopting a mixed-use multimodal area as identified in OAR 660-012-0060 for the area on either side of Main Street, south from 11th Street, through downtown and into the proposed Willamette Falls downtown district.
We have, the blue is abstain, I believe. We have three yeses and one abstention. Four yeses and one abstention. Thanks for coming. So the motion passes.
Anything else?
This is an ordinance, yes, you need to make a motion to dispose of ordinance proposal 14-1016.
Move to approve what Ed just said.
And final adoption.
And
Second
final
reading,
adoption.
Okay.
Moved by Commissioner Mims, seconded by Commissioner Polly.
This is ordinance number 14-1016, an ordinance adopting a concept master plan, adopting amendment to ancillary documents of the comprehensive plan, and amending Oregon City Municipal Code chapters 17.06.020, zoning district classifications, official zoning map, 17.35, Willamette Falls Downtown District, 17.48.110, Willamette River Greenway Prohibited Activities, 17.52.020, off-street parking and loading, number of auto spaces required, and amending the comprehensive plan map by changing a portion of the property identified as Clackamas County Map 419 Main Street and no address in Oregon City, Oregon 97045, 2-2E-31BD-00300 500, 600, 390, from general industrial, in parens GI, in quotes, to a newly created Willamette Falls Downtown District, in parens, end quotes, WFDD, end quote, end parens, and amending the comprehensive plan designation from industrial, in parens I, in quotes, to mixed use downtown, in parens, end quotes, MUD, close quotes, close parens. Oregon City Planning File, Master Plan, CP 14-02, Zone Change and Text Amendment, ZC 14-03, Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment and amendments to ancillary documents of the Comprehensive Plan, PZ 14.01.
Vote, please. Vote is unanimous. Thank you all for your diligent work
Thank
on this.
you.
I appreciate it. Thank you all in the public
Thank
for
you
your
all.
comments, too.
There were a lot of eyes on this. Went through a big process. So
And no names.
thank you, everybody.
No names.
No nays, no nays. Anyway, we're having the next item. The next item is an ordinance for introduction, 141017, the continuing the Economic Improvement District, and I believe we'll get a staff report from Eric Underwood, and I presume have some presentations from Main Street, too.
Probably have some comments from them,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Tonight I present to you the first reading for continuing the Economic Development District, or Economic Improvement District, excuse me. On September 17th of this year, the City Commission authorized and adopted a resolution to call for a public hearing regarding extending the district. The initial EID became effective April 2011 with a 4-year term, and it's due to expire this coming April 2015. With the first reading of this ordinance, the city is considering a 3-year extension for the EID. The continuance is necessitated by the activities that have yet to be completed that will further enhance the economic viability of Main Street. Some of these activities include the economic development programs focused on business and developer recruitment, marketing and promotions focused on the downtown marketplace, infrastructure improvement projects with the EID for downtown streetscapes enhancements, and downtown program operations and management activities. The current proposal includes an assessment of 1% with a value cap of $1,950 with an estimated generated revenue of approximately $118,000. Assessments would be collected by the city, and expenditure of funds would be determined by the Main Street Oregon City Board, subject to a personal services agreement signed by both parties. With that, I'll open it up and I'll entertain any questions.
Yes, in my understanding, the boundaries are the same as the current?
Yes, they are.
Any questions at this point?
Not yet.
We'll open it to the floor. Jonathan Stone and David Nash, please come forward.
I'm sorry. Good evening. My name is Jonathan Stone, and I'm the Executive Director of the Downtown Oregon City Association. I believe our contract still says Main Street, Oregon City, but nevertheless, one and the same. And I'm also a resident of Oregon City. You've heard me speak before in August, where I share the outcomes of the recent branding project that we've undergone. But I also wanted to build upon the letter that you all received as part of the record for this evening from our board, and share with you the organization's objectives that encompass the proposed 3-year renewal period. After all, our property owners are essentially purchasing a service, and the renewal is best understood in the context of the type of value we intend to deliver. So this past summer, our board met to establish a 5-year plan, and a part of those was establishing objectives. And I'm just going to share with you those objectives. To reduce the vacancy rate to lower than 5%, remind you where we started was almost nearly 30%.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to share that I'm not a statistician, but we're pretty much crossing the 10% threshold as we speak. And the second objective is to activate the first floor, and the influx of retail we've experienced over the past 6 months especially is a giant step forward in this regard. Third objective, to develop housing units within the district. Whether it is at the mill, adaptive reuse, or infill construction throughout the district, we agree with the Commission that this is crucial for district vibrancy. The fourth objective is to continue incentivizing and promoting investment in existing structures. One of our successes as an organization has been catalyzing property owner investment and helping them to take advantage of existing incentive programs, as well as helping to tailor those programs to best suit current development needs at the time. We've arguably crossed a threshold. The last of the really challenged gateway structures has been rejuvenated. The bar has been raised, but the work revitalizing our existing buildings is not done. The fifth objective, I have these as bullet points, so I probably should have numbered them, but to activate what few public spaces that we have, and whether it is at an annual event or an ongoing market. We've made significant investments in active programming downtown and are ramping up that program to draw even more of the spotlight to Oregon City. The next objective, to integrate downtown with the mill site, which now we have the opportunity to do so. Thank you for passing the master plan. Downtown needs coordination with the proposed development and we plan to be that voice. And another objective is to partner with and support city downtown economic development objectives. The city has a number of projects and initiatives that dovetail with our efforts. Where possible, we want to magnify those and improve downtown's participation in those programs. And the final objective, I see the red light, to create a stronger link between the north end of downtown and what is commonly referred to as the historic core. We've plucked off a lot of low-hanging fruit now, and we need to broaden our scope more specifically to include all of the economic improvement district. For instance, we've made strides in our marketing program most immediately, but the board has made it a priority to work on more specific investment programs in those other areas. So with the funding from the Economic Improvement District, we are able to maintain a broad program base that addresses the marketing and branding of downtown to consumers and prospective investors, as well as working towards making downtown an attractive and thriving civic center. Economic improvement districts are powerful tools that I hope that the last 4 years have proved that. Continued district will allow us to maintain a similar momentum that has marked the past 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. David Nash.
Well, I was thinking about offering to take that extra minute off of my time to keep us on schedule, but I can't promise that. My name is David Nash. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a downtown business owner as well as the president of the board for Main Street Oregon City. I have not adopted the new acronym quite yet. It'll get in my head, too. What I wanted to share about really was more from the perspective of a business owner and hopefully a future property owner in downtown. I was invited to come down and take over an existing office for the business that I work with. And when I was first told this, I thought, seriously, downtown Oregon City? I'd lived out of the state for a little while. My first experience with Oregon City was when I was about 12 years old. Downtown was not what it is today. I think most of us are very grateful for that.
Yeah.
So before I was willing to throw my hat in, I said, I got to come down and see this office. I'd heard it was a really nice place. That was my first time coming into downtown since the revitalization process had started. And I've got to tell you, honestly, my wife and I were very, very impressed. Shortly after accepting that position and taking over the office, I was introduced to Main Street Oregon City and the opportunity to participate in what I believe is historic change for our community. Mm-hmm. And I believe very strongly in what we're doing down here. And I believe we're accomplishing a tremendous amount of good for our community. I mentioned earlier about the idea of being a business owner. I think oftentimes when we're looking at the EID renewal, we look directly at the property owners and their concerns and whatnot, and we forget that the business owners play a significant part in the value behind the EID. As a business owner, I can tell you sincerely, I wouldn't even think about buying a property unless the properties have been upgraded the way they have been. The improvements are significant. And for my wife and myself, I mean, we're looking at about a 5 to 10 year timeline before we'll look for something down there. We're excited. We're actually very excited about that opportunity. We talk about what our space might look like and how we can serve our community too. So with that said, I can't encourage you enough to support the renewal of the ID and the ongoing support of what we're doing with the Main Street program. And without going into any more details too much, although I see I still have a minute to go, I'm kind of actually keeping my word to giving Jonathan my minute. I'm excited about what we have on the table. That 5-year planning process really was great. I think it brought some things together that a lot of us on the board are very excited about, and we can't wait for Oregon City to see what we bring to the table for you guys too. So thank you very much for your
Thank
support.
you.
You gave him only 30 seconds.
Okay, good, all right.
With that, William Gifford and Tara Vincent.
Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford. I live in Oregon City. And as president of the Oregon City Business Alliance, I just want to underscore the Business Alliance's concern that we continue the momentum that we have built on Main Street. The progresses that have been on Main Street and now Oregon City, downtown Oregon City, is remarkable. It's unusual for me to talk to someone who has not been downtown for a while and comes down there and sees what all has been going on, and it's just amazing. And I want to make sure that we keep that momentum going. I did mention that we do feel that it would be in the best interests of that EID that perhaps next time around we expand that to do a little bit more on the north end. I would like to see all the good work that's being done continued and more of it. So that's our comments on the EID, and I certainly hope that you support it.
Thank you. Tara Vincent.
My name is Tara Vincenti, and I am a business owner down on Main Street. I opened up my shop February of this past year, and I want to thank you and everyone that has already shown support of the EID. As a business owner, I can't express how important it is that we get support not only from just our customers, as people make grand assumptions about that's as far as the buck goes, as far as us being successful, but it's the entire community. And the EID is a way for us to literally monetarily support all of the hard work that we're doing down there. And everything from the relationships with our the building owners and the restorations that's happening on an individual level there, as well as Main Street as a whole, is incredibly important. And I can't express enough the positive feedback and energy that I'm getting from all my customers already, of people being excited about what they're seeing happening downtown and how much more they would like to see happen. And so in my position as far as dealing with my customers, dealing with our business owners, and dealing with all the amazing tools that the downtown Main Street organization has already provided for us business owners, that it's really important. And I absolutely give my full support for the EID.
Thank you, and my apologies for mispronouncing your name.
Oh, that's no problem.
If I could use just a couple more seconds, because I didn't use all my time and she didn't either, but I just want to point out that I am not one for just throwing money at a problem. As a matter of fact, I think that's really the wrong approach, is just throw money at things. This is not just throwing money at things. This organization, this downtown Oregon City, has a plan, a well-managed plan, a well-thought-out plan with a proven track record. And I just want to consider that this is a real investment in our community.
It's not throwing money at a problem, it's throwing money at a solution.
There you go. There you go. Not bad. Not bad.
Very good. Commissioner Smith. I'm counting this as public testimony. You got 3 minutes. Before we take commission comments, I would just like all the business owners and property owners and within the EID or within the Main Street area to just stand, because there's several of you here, if you would.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith, now you can take as much time as you want.
I will. No. Well, I want to echo some of the things that have already been said. I think that there's, growing up in this city, spending, my entire life in this city, I've never spent as much time as I'm spending now on Main Street. I don't think I get through a day without being on Main Street. It's just a great place to be. I'm talking to people every single day, my father included, who just went to downtown. I don't know the last time he was downtown, probably the last time he was in a police car. And it was like he didn't even know where he was, which could be a few other things, but he might watch it, yeah. But it was, I guess what I'm saying is, it's, why do I go downtown every day? Because it's so fun to just listen to people, like, kind of be in shock. I mean, people are walking down the street, people are excited, people are talking about it, and most of the people don't live here. I mean, I'm bringing in people to do walking tours downtown. I've heard, I don't know how many times I've heard someone say, I had no idea. There's so many things happening, and so many things going on that you can't really walk from one end of Main Street to the other without stopping and talking about how exciting it is with everyone that you pass. I think, the work that Lloyd did, building kind of the first level foundation. Oh, I didn't mean to demean it by saying that. He did a lot of work that kind of started this process to really revision downtown, and I think Jonathan has done equally, if not more, amount of work in a very short time to revision downtown, and to say now we're going to stop, I think is crazy. Yeah. I think that the effort that has been put in the last year even to re-image downtown Oregon City, I think sets us up now for the staff, Jonathan, and the new staff to, kind of start now at another level and keep going. I mean, some of the efforts that have been made. Well, actually, if you think about, people maybe saying downtown, well, gosh, they should be doing more. Well, they will be doing more. Now that they've revisioned all this and have a starting point to really go in a direction, that's what they've set out to do. That's what they've been working so hard to come to this point so that they can go to the next step. And, I think I can speak for everyone in this room in saying this is there's been ebbs and flows in Main Street where you go down Main Street and it's dead to kind of, wow, things are happening, and then it goes back, and then it comes. This is the highest, most exciting time I've ever seen on Main Street, and to stop that now, it can't happen, especially when we're talking about building a new Main Street or a new section of Main Street. I mean, this has to keep going, because guess what? If we get that vacancy rate down to 5% or 1%, guess what? We got to start building. And so if we don't shrink that, then we aren't going to see anything at Willamette Falls. This is all interconnected. Tourism, economic development, downtown, everything, and I've never seen all of the people in this town so much on the same page. And if we don't do it now, this town is not going to be what we know it can be. So anyway, that's enough.
Commissioner Pauling.
Oh, that's my pen. I got plenty of pens.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I'll just tell a little story. So when I first came to the commission, and it'll be 3 years and a few months, I thought, okay, well, this is a lot. And then Mayor Neely said, oh no, you have to be on other boards.
This is just
you have to do
part of it.
other things. And he went through a list, and some of them sounded drier than other things, but he said Main Street, and I was excited because I had already seen some changes, and I'm very sentimental to Main Streets. I grew up in an area that didn't have one, and so to see that core, and I've also seen a lot of Main Streets that have totally been obliterated, or all the growth has been somewhere else, and that core hasn't lived on. And so at first on the Main Street Board, it was pretty easy. The executive director did most of it, and we just kind of sat there. And then it got real interesting. I felt there was a little bit of disconnect with really involvement. It seemed a little bit passive, and it's like, how can we get people involved? So we really started working together, what we could do, taking a look at our organization. We had, new executive director, and Sherry Stewart from Main Street, Oregon. She came and gave us a review. So we really opened ourselves up to, what can we do better? How can we rethink this? This is a new, process now, a new step. We have lots of opportunities with the mill site. Let's move on. Let's evolve. And so that included a lot more meetings. We developed a 5-year plan, lots more involvement, return to the committee structure, which means more involvement by business owners in particular, which is so important, that they have a say in what's going on and that they're involved in their community, what's going on the ground level. A lot more emphasis on marketing and also growing the board. I just talked to a couple of people today and really getting the word out that anybody can apply to be on the board. It's an open process, so we're growing the board also. So I'm very excited with all the changes. I feel like things are really happening. Jonathan's been very involved and really kind of having fresh eyes on it, bringing a lot of marketing and tangible things that businesses can use to help their own marketing and kind of work together as a partnership. And I think that's a great point of Main Street, is to develop partnerships and work together. I mean, it's not about running someone's business for them or making them successful. You have to do that by yourself, but if you have a partner to help you with tools and marketing, and you're improving the lights on the street, lamps are great, just all those things, it really develops that partnership, a placemaking to make the area better and continue revitalization.
Before the Main Street program, there were things to build upon already. We have many businesses and property owners that are here that had individual visions of their own. Dan Fowler's territorial building, Don Slack, the property owners he represents, Rob Crocker, who actually brought us a business cluster. I don't know if we had any business clusters before that, but so we had a core that the Main Street could work with, and these people have been instrumental in pulling these things forward. It's been the case of new people with visions buying property there, and then Main Street getting its start, and then the integration of all those things. And I should also mention events that have come into play. Actually, when I was running first time for commission, it was the Antique Fair. It was actually a city entity, and then we gave it to the chamber, and they've continued on, and now it's a joint Main Street Chamber project. But we've had various events that have been going on. Some haven't been as successful as others. Others have been extremely successful, bringing in literally thousands of people. And so I just wanted not to only recognize the need for the EID, but recognize the tremendous partnership we've had down on Main Street, and the visions that have come before Main Street that have then that have been expanded by the Main Street program, and just wanted to compliment all of you that have been involved.
I move to approve.
I'm sorry.
Up.
I just have one more order of business here before we go there. Just wanted to say that our next step will be, our requirement is to send out another notice to all the property owners within the EID with their individual assessments.
Right.
And not to bring down the room or anything, but if we do receive objections to the EID of property owners that constitute more than 33% of the assessed value,
Yeah.
then we will not go to a public hearing for the second reading.
And now for the motion.
Move to approve what?
First reading.
First reading, 14-1017, continuing the economic improvement district.
I second that.
Motion made by Commissioner Munn, seconded by Commissioner Polly.
This is ordinance number 14-1017, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City extending the Downtown Economic Improvement District.
Vote please. And of course, complete support. I didn't think there would be anything else after all the discussions.
Thanks, you guys, for
yes,
being
yes,
here.
Thank you very much. We're going to have now the public hearing on sale of surplus property on Maple Lane Road to Historic Properties, Inc. And that'll go to Public Works Director John Lewis. And you might mention why it goes to you, too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
You might mention why it goes to you, too. How we got that property, I guess.
Right, I'm going to go through that in a little bit of detail. So, yeah, we're talking about what we call surplus property, or what ODOT actually calls surplus property.
Excuse me, may I interrupt? Christine, you are on my list. Is this for this or the previous? Okay, very good. I just want to make sure I didn't miss you.
Okay. So this is property on the opposite end of town. So up on the hilltop off of Beaver Creek Road, near the edge of the city, is a road called Maple Lane Road. And the section of Maple Lane Road that we're talking about is really between Beaver Creek Road and Maple Lane Court. And just a little background on this is, first of all, there's no historic buildings out there. There's no environmental issues. I don't know of any geologic hazards out there. We have got a fairly simple transaction, and I think we've had lots of discussion about this particular property in executive session. So we're just kind of bringing it forward, but I want to share a little bit about this for the public that maybe isn't aware of this. But that Maple Lane, interestingly enough, we learned when we were working with Clackamas County about a transaction to transfer road jurisdiction of Maple Lane and Thayer Road and several other roads, that Maple Lane was actually fee simple property. It wasn't public right of way, and despite the fact that the county had been maintaining it for years, it actually belonged to ODOT. So there was a bit of a learning curve there about who owned the property and who should have been maintaining it and who has jurisdiction over it. And it turns out that ODOT bought that property and built Maple Lane Road when 213 came through, and so. Here they had this property that Maple Lane was sitting on, but it had never been dedicated as public right-of-way. So we went through the process with ODOT to both transfer the jurisdiction and create public right-of-way there. And along with that property that Maple Lane sat on, there was some remnant property, because they basically brought several properties to kind of piece an alignment together to build Maple Lane. And so out of that, they said, well, we'll give the city the right of way, but the surplus property, that other property that's not part of Maple Lane, is property that we want the city to acquire, or they get the first right of refusal. So that's what the city had done. We've talked about that in executive session. We've purchased that property. It's 1.88 acres, and it includes really property along Maple Lane. There's also a pretty wide section near Walnut Grove Way, and so this is fee simple property that we're talking about that we now own. We bought it based on a appraisal that the state provided, and our discussion was that we should definitely recoup the amount that we paid for it, plus the staff time involved with
the sale and the whole transaction. So throughout the conversation, we looked at historic properties because they own several neighboring parcels along that frontage there, and they've actually presented the city with concepts on how they would like to develop that particular piece of property. And so for us, we saw it as an opportunity to help with the completion of a proposed development out there. It also meant that we'd likely see a development proposal come in one piece as opposed to many pieces. So there's some advantages to the city in getting that through kind of a land use approval process. So we think it's the right thing to do. The purchase and sales agreement talks, pretty basic stuff that you would expect to see in a purchase and sales agreement. We added a declaration of covenant and restriction, which is further assures the city that a couple things will happen. So item A on that is declarant hereby declares that the future development of the property shall include a transportation system that is designed to support and build out the capacity of the area and resolve the transition problem associated with the proximity of Thayer Road to Beaver Creek Road. Those two are pretty close. So as we see growth in that area out in the county, even we expect more traffic. Thayer Road is going to continue to be a problem. So that's one of the requirements. And we also asked the declarant that he would seek no additional compensation from the city for the dedication of roadway on the property itself. So we're getting a good value for the land, plus we've added some conditions that the purchaser's agreeable to. So with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Questions? Nothing from the commission at this point. In that case, we'll go ahead for public comments. Christine Kaczynski, please come forward. And along with her, Mike Mitchell. No, you're first, Christine. You just both come up at the same time, but you're the first speaker.
Christine Kaczynski. I live on Holly Lane in unincorporated Clackamas County. Historic Properties has been acquiring properties in the Maple Lane and Maple Court area since about 2007, with the probable intentions of developing this entire corner of Maple Lane to Beaver Creek Road to Highway 213. I do not see that the city put this recent transaction out for competitive bidding. It would seem that this would be beneficial to your taxpayers to have the city bargain in their best behalf. Parcel 1 is especially prone to future landslide activity, and yet I do not see that the city has provided the purchaser with a property disclosure statement as set forth in state law ORS 105.462 to 105.490. In fact, on page 5, under number 9 of the purchase and sale agreement, it is stated, the seller shall sell the property to the purchaser, and the purchaser shall accept the property from the seller as is. Where is and with all faults? How can the city do this when the property is in a landslide hazard zone and you have not disclosed this? It goes against state law. Both parcels are located next to the old bus barn, which has also been sold to Historic Properties. The old bus barn is almost sitting right on top of the New Elk Creek landslide, which has destroyed the New Elk Creek apartments. If you will recall, it was in 1993 that Professor Scott Burns came to Oregon City with studies performed in 1992, indicating evidence of an ancient landslide in the area, and concluded that the ravine was therefore a poor location for buildings. Professor Burns presented his report to the city in January of 1993, urging that the proposed apartment complex not be built. The City Commission cut the number of units from 250 to 125, but approved the development, only to have the landslides reactivate a few years after development, destroying much of the complex. As if this was not enough, the city approved the Newell Ridge subdivision on the western ridge of the canyon. The homes were built in the late 1990s, and by 2005, several homes were damaged due to landslides. The backyard of one home disappeared. Homes lost decks and parts of their foundations. All of this activity was a huge loss to homeowners who were unable to obtain difference in conditions insurance, which is the insurance to cover losses due to landslides. When Historic Properties comes before the city to seek approval for development in this area of the old Bus Barn, it is sure to meet with much disapproval since so much devastation has already occurred here, and unfortunately will continue to happen because these landslides will be a forever problem, with everyone wondering just when they will reactivate again and how much damage will be inflicted. I'm giving you a copy of ORS 105.462 and a Dogami landslide map showing the old Bus Barn property on Maple Lane Court. And when you talk about a transportation system, I didn't have time tonight to talk to you about the transportation system. Unfortunately, the only place right now is Holly Lane and Maple Lane, and they're both full. As a matter of fact, I counted up the homes that you've been building on Maple Lane. You have already built about 200 homes in Crabtree Terrace, about 300 in Walnut Grove, over 200 in Thayer Estates, and close to 200 more homes on Thayer Road. Once you open Holly Lane, that gives us, just with those homes, almost 10,000 more trips a day. When you have homes that sit close to the road and hundreds of driveways that are very close to Holly Lane, a terrible situation. So if you come up with a transportation system that meets with providing safety for the people of Holly Lane, I would like to be on that committee. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have our staff respond to those questions. Mike Mitchell.
Excuse me. Mike Mitchell, I'm an Oregon City resident. In fact, I live on Walnut Grove Way, just a couple of blocks away from this piece of property. I was glad to see the condition that Mr. Lewis read concerning the use of that property for improving the transportation. I just hope that it's strong enough and early enough to protect us. The reason I'm concerned is because of something that occurred on the other side of my home, sort of on the east end of that triangle of Thayer and Maple Lane. The Crabtree Terrace subdivision was planned in 2 phases. The second phase, part of the plan, was a connection to Maple Lane Road. I believe the developer took advantage of a little loophole in our process or in our legal rights. He chose to not build on a handful of those lots and did not make the connection, even though it was in phase 2 that he had to make that connection. So I guess what I'm concerned about, and I'm not trying to say that Historic Properties is going to try to game the system. What I am saying is I think we need enough protection in there that that property is used first for transportation improvement and in the first phase of any development that goes on in that area. Don't put it off. You know, the traffic impact, as the other speaker, there are several new subdivisions there, and I'm a part of it, I'll admit. There's 3 new subdivisions now in there. The Meriwether subdivision on Thayer they're building 20 to 25 houses right now in there, and that's all going to go down to those 2 intersections. So please make sure that this property is used to fix that transportation and in the first part of any development that goes in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Foley and Dan Fowler.
Have we ever been up here together?
I don't think so in all these years. My name is Mark Foley. I'm one of the managing members of Historic Properties LLC, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have in regards to this. As John has laid out to you tonight in his presentation, this has been a very long process in assembling these pieces of property together, and the ODOT piece is one of the last ones to assemble. And the reason for assembling this piece into our program that we have going on here is that we knew there were some, as delineated by the master plan, or I think your transportation master plan, there were some problems with those intersections and how all that tied together, and the ODOT piece was a crucial piece to that. So we've spent a lot of time talking to ODOT and in structuring this and bringing it before you tonight so that we can not have a permanent blackberry patch in the middle of a new developing area of Oregon City. And as the lady before me spoke to any geological hazards, I think we're well to the east of those things. But those are all parts of, those geological studies are all parts of development that come later in a project and that are dealt with, and the city doesn't put at any risk for that because we hire experts to dictate what those things would be to mitigating those problems. So we're here to answer any questions you might have, and it hasn't been taken lightly. It's been 3 or 4 years with ODOT and getting to this point here this evening. So,
Dan Fowler, also one of the managing members of Historic Properties. I want to thank the staff, and I recall when we first started this, and we've, I know most of you, and I haven't talked to anybody about this, so it's kind of an interesting thing. But the very first, and I appreciate Mike's comments and concern about traffic, that was my number one concern. And when we first started over 7 years ago, the very first discussion we had was with John Lewis. And his words were, you have to solve there, or basically forget about it. And we took that to task, and we will be meeting with the neighborhood. We will be going over our master plans with them, and we're excited to do so. And we really believe, after about 30 different design ideas in the area, that we have come up with two really good solutions for that area. However, this piece is critical to either option that we're looking at. And so it's an important piece in terms of that development. But transportation and making sure that the development is right and well received. The way we look at it, if the transportation isn't right, it's not going to be a good place to be. And it just isn't. It's not going to attract either people that would want to live there or businesses that want to occupy the space to be there. So you have to solve the transportation for the development. At the same time, you've got to be very sensitive and solve it for the neighborhood that you're becoming a part of, and we intend to do that.
Thank you.
I'm going to have John Lewis, since Christine Kosinski brought up the question of competitive bid. We had discussions in executive session, and I think it's worthy of noting the process.
Right, so we talked about those options. That was something that we could have pursued. We collectively, I won't say agreed because we don't necessarily make those decisions, but we pursued under the understanding from the beginning that this was a property that would be acquired by the city and grouped essentially with the neighboring parcels in some fashion, whether that be a developer agreement or a sales agreement like what we've got. And I think what we have is a hybrid of that. And so, yeah, we didn't advertise this for. I think the city commission has that option, and we got that on direct advice from it.
We're gonna. Any questions of us?
Nope.
Yeah, I'm going to make a comment because Christine's concerns, I think, are concerns that I would always have. We had, and I'm not making any reference to Mr. Fowler because he was involved in those developments. We had developers that hired geotechs along Newell Ridge and Newell Crest, and also in the apartment complex discussed. And in one of those cases, a person that was to become department head of the Portland State's geology department gave testimony to the Planning Commission, and the city's consultant agreed with it, and the Planning Commission turned that development down. It went to the City Commission, and the City Commission overrode the Planning Commission's decision, and indeed there were slides in the development of that area. And my caution here is quite simple, that when it goes through a process, goes through the Planning Commission process and so forth, that any city commission has to take those considerations very, very seriously. And when we are in geologic hazard areas that are being looked at, I think there is a benefit.
This is not, by the way, this particular area is not.
No, I understand, but I'm talking about the development itself. She was talking about the development itself. And what I was going to simply state, I think, based on a very sad history we've had in those areas, that I think it would be beneficial to have the staff bring in an independent consultant to look at these things as they come forward. That happened before, but the independent consultant's recommendations were ignored in one case by the city commission.
And our geohazards code allows for that, and we're doing that pretty regularly now.
I know you are, but I wanted to emphasize that the history that Christina Kaczynski brings up is a real one, and it's one that concerns us all. Commissioner Smith.
The comment about the traffic and the intersection, I think we as a commission looked at concepts for that the development, and was very much our feeling that most, if not almost the entire parcel of this property would be used to deal with either accessing the property or fixing the street.
Commissioner Paul.
Yes. So, Historic Properties owns the property, and then the little not easements, but the little slivers, they're really not useful. They really wouldn't be useful to anybody. They're just useful because they connect this property to access points. And then there is that opportunity to, create better access and traffic flow. And so I just don't think that those little slivers would be even marketable. They're only relevant in conjunction with this piece. And the process that everything will have to go through to make sure that the traffic can flow and everything, this allows the piece to actually improve the traffic conditions there, and I would expect that process to be followed fully through the planning process. So that's very important.
Commissioner Moon.
Well, history is good. We learn a lot from history, and I totally believe that this staff and this commission have learned from past. Landslides are an issue. The commission overruling the planning commission is something I would not have supported myself. I've said tonight to the planning commissioners that spoke on another issue that I really do value their opinions. Historic properties, I am assuming that there's going to be something there. And I think it's going to go through the Planning Commission. Transportation is going to be dealt with because that is a piece that's already put in there. I just think that we have to learn from our history, and I think we have. So that's all I have to say.
Commissioner Roth.
Yeah, I've got two questions. Christine, did you say that you had Dogami maps for us?
I left them with Nancy Elliott.
These right here?
Yes. They're on the website.
Okay, and then is it possible for us to see your proposals for taking care of that transportation route?
Is it? So we have concept drawings that we've shared in executive session.
Yeah.
We didn't include them in this package.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, the one I wasn't here.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Mayor.
Pardon?
Mr. Mayor, a couple of things. Ms. Kaczynski referred to some statutes, and I wondered why the property lawyers on either side didn't look at it, and there's a good reason for it. 105-470 excludes from the provisions of the disclosure statement sales or transfers by governmental agencies. So it doesn't, it's not covered. Secondly, there is no bidding process here. The statute contemplates that you give notice so God and everybody can show up.
Right.
And you can make a decision on the best deal for the city, and that's in your discretion. And you're not required to enter into this agreement. You may or may not. It's up to you.
And I want to make it clear, also, just one more comment, if I may. We were, when this came before us, we all agreed that the city was not going to lose money on this project. So that, in my opinion, you guys have done a good job of making sure that we have not lost.
I would think we wanted to make money, as I recall.
I believe we wanted to make money, I guess. That's what we wanted. But we definitely did not want to lose money.
Do I hear a motion?
Can we see the maps first?
Yeah, do you want to pass them around? Thank you.
Why not? Because they're small.
They're very small.
So, they're small, and I went away and walked away without my glasses. So,
I'll have to take mine off and I can see.
So the property we're talking about is there's a little bit here and there's a little bit here. And this map represents the overall development. I think.
Historic
properties. They own a few parcels right on this edge that would be part of their development. So there's likely going to be some geologic hazards kind of work that they'll have to do in that area. But up in the property that we're selling is quite a ways from anything that's shown on good.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with this.
And this is just for the sale of the property.
Yes.
When they go to issue permits,
They're going to have to go before the
through
planning
whole process and
commission.
get the
Right.
geotech
Yeah.
reports and everything.
There's a lot of layers they'll have to go through.
Lots of layers to the onion.
Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve public hearing of sale of supplement.
Sorry, sale of property.
Okay.
Purchase and sales agreement.
Right.
Purchase and sales agreement.
I second that.
Moved by Commissioner Smith and seconded by...
What?
Commissioner Pollak, seconded by Commissioner Pollak.
There you go.
And the vote, please, and it's unanimous. We'll now go to 8D that was formerly under the consent agenda. It was Resolution 1429, authorizing the city manager to complete the sale of Maple Lane area property.
And I will move to approve that.
Okay. Is that?
Moved by Commissioner Mum, seconded by Commissioner Roth. Vote, please. Again, unanimous. Thank you. We have before us now the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Oh, general business. No, I'm wrong.
business.
Excuse me. Establishing the Oregon City Enterprise Zone.
Oh, yeah.
We had a study session on it and everything else.
Yes.
Going to cut them off. Sorry about
I
that.
had forgotten about that.
So, thank you, Mayor. This is a request for the City Commission to establish an enterprise zone for Oregon City. On October 1st, 2014, the Commission gave its consent, authorized staff to move forward with the process for applying for a zone. Since that time, we've met with the affected taxing districts, to which there were no objections. We had a public meeting. We've also noticed them. In addition to that public outreach, we have made announcements at Chamber of Commerce events of our intent, and we've had direct contact with interested individuals as well. No objections at all with any of those contacts were received. So the final step of this application process is to submit the application along with the resolution. You see that attached to this staff report is the map that we will be submitting as well. The map includes, it's primarily focused on the Beaver Creek area. We've taken out the Clackamas Community College. It also includes the Red Soils area and a good portion of Malala. Avenue. We also have a portion of our enterprise zone in the north end of town along 213 on the south and north sides of 205. Around the Cove area, and there's a small industrial area there. And I will mention that the enterprise zone is focused on incentivizing industrial development with those related jobs.
And they have to have so many jobs coming.
Right. They have to increase, any qualifying project has to increase their employment by 10%.
Yeah.
And they have to maintain that throughout their exemption period.
And so adoption of this resolution is just so the application can be submitted.
Yes, so we have to show that we've established the enterprise zone, and then we will submit it. It is a competitive process. There is a slot open for 2 zones within the state. I attended a workshop on Monday, and I understood from the state zone director that there were 3 applications that were going to be submitted, so it was going to be competitive. However, one of those has dropped out, so we're pretty much a shoo-in.
Yay!
As long as we get our application in on time.
And I want to say, I really feel this is important because as well as incentivizing new job producers, it also incentivizes companies to stay here
Right.
that want to grow instead of moving somewhere else.
Correct. And I've had contact with at least 3 companies that exist here in Oregon City now that could use this, that are looking to expand, and they would use this program.
I was just going to add with the Clackamas Community College bond passing, which is kind of a big part of this puzzle. This is the time to do this as well.
Right, there's a lot of opportunities for partnerships. I move to.
Can I
is there
make-
anything-
Yeah, we might have some more comments. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner Bob.
I just have a couple questions because I've been doing a little bit of research on this and I've realized that California has outlawed these and wanted to know a little bit more of what's going on with this.
Well, each zone is different. It's set up differently. And California incorporated commercial, retail type developments where they were not getting a bang for their buck. That's pretty much the gist, the bottom line of what I know about California enterprise zones. Oregon enterprise zones are termed shorter, so they're 3 to 5 years. I think California's were 10, the exemption. And we tie ours to jobs, whereas California did not. I think it was just the total investment. And ours is focused on industrial only. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think
Don't
you
look at
covered
the
the.
I'm like, I don't know. I don't remember put my name there.
Go for it. You're not going to get many more chances.
Well, that's true.
It's hard.
But I think I was simply going to say what you said, and I was disappointed that you said it
Well, I'm
first.
sorry. I can take it back.
No, you keep it. You
When
can.
I rewind.
you can keep it. That's fine. So that go ahead with the motion.
Okay.
Go ahead with the motion.
Move to approve resolution number 14-27, establishing the Oregon City Enterprise Zone.
And second.
Well, the second's, the button's
okay.
not
Second.
quite working.
Yeah, we-
Button.
Commissioner Smith.
Sorry.
Commissioner Smith seconded. Vote please. So unanimous. That's
Thank
very
you.
good.
Thank you.
Good job.
With that, we'll go on to the consent agenda.
No, you've still got one more.
Oh man, what am I doing here? Oh, that's right. This is an ad. That's right. I had 2 agendas here, and one had 7A and the other one had 7B. Yes.
Maybe we need to maybe take a break.
Yes. This is the amending the right-of-way usage fees, certain public utilities operating within the Oregon City right-of-ways. This is actually an add-on. Before I go into this, we wanted to make sure we were not getting involved in something that the next commission may have concerns about. And we've had actually discussions with the newly elected people that would have been involved in this, and for reasons that will become clear, they said that we should go ahead and proceed with this particular resolution. and that'll become clear as it's being presented by Mr. Lewis.
Right, I'm gonna introduce Lance Polson, and he's gonna come up and present most of this. But I just wanted to say that this action that we're asking you to take tonight is really an adjustment to our existing ordinance. And as an advocate for the right-of-way and someone who does probably most of the work that I do is in the right-of-way, having this kind of ordinance and a decision like this that helps to strengthen that ordinance is something that's near and dear to my heart. So appreciate your consideration. And Lance has got a slideshow to share with you, and we're going to go through that, and then hopefully we can finalize that with a decision that would help kind of keep our right-of-way program strong. So Lance Polson is our right-of-way manager, and most of you know him because we've again shared this topic with you in in other meetings. But I think this is his first city commission meeting, so welcome, Lance. And he does such a great job one-on-one meetings. I know he's going to do a great job here too.
Thank you, John, and good evening.
Don't start stuttering, whatever you do now.
I'll try not to. So I prepared a short presentation to talk about the adjustment that I would recommend that we do to the resolution that you guys passed last year in November regarding the right-of-way management. So I'll just jump right into it. And I'm going to start off a little bit in review and then go in and talk into more detail about two specific utilities that I'd like to have you take a look at and see kind of what we've discovered through some due diligence that we've done. So many of the utility companies that were using the right-of-way prior to the ordinance were using that right-of-way at no cost, they weren't paying a fee to the city for rent for using the right-of-way. And like I said, in November, you guys passed the right-of-way ordinance that gave the city a policy to manage those folks within the right-of-way. And within that right-of-way, we've identified 41 different utility companies that either have a franchise agreement or they have acquired a license to operate within the right-of-way. So as looking at those existing utility companies, we've noticed that some of them are paying substantially under market rate. So going to the League of Cities, 44 of the largest cities in Oregon have identified right-of-way management as a top 4 priority for what they identify is extremely important to cities. So as part of that, in 2012, they did a survey for franchise fees that are paid to city. This is a copy of it here. And what it is it goes through all of the utilities that pay a franchise fee for rent to use cities right away. And what we noticed is that within Oregon City, PGE and Northwest Natural Gas, they currently pay 3.5% for PGE and 3% for Northwest Natural Gas. And based on this survey, that is the lowest in the state. So, looking at other cities in several in Clackamas County, West Linn, Happy Valley, Milwaukee, Wilsonville, and Portland, they all charge at least 5% for both utilities. So the rate for PGE, I did some looking at some of the ordinances, and one of the earliest ones I found in 1972, the rate has remained the same since then, over 40 years. Northwest Natural Gas, similar since 1978. That rate has remained unchanged. So as an example to how this will affect folks, with a rate of 1.5% on a $50 PGE bill, it would mean an increase of 75 cents. So with this simple resolution change, the Oregon City increasing to the market rate of 5% with both utilities, it can realize an approximately $500,000 per year in addition to the city. So the question that this may raise is, well, how is this going to affect PGE? How is this going to affect natural gas, Northwest Natural Gas? So I've been in contact with the government liaison with both of those companies, and PGE will need a 90-day notice, and they've said that they basically remain neutral regarding this change. And they have a letter that they provide to the residents kind of explaining what it is. And in a similar way, Northwest Natural Gas would need 45 to 90 days.
It's 90 now.
90, okay. So it's going to line up with the exact same timeline. And they're, again, very willing to cooperate, and including how the language will appear on the bill. So that, in essence, is what I would recommend, is that this is long overdue. I feel that it's appropriate that we get back to market rate. And with that, I would like to open it up to any questions that you may have.
I'll take this moment to explain why it's coming to us now rather than the next commission. It's this period of days that we have, 90 days. The elected members, the newly elected members of the commission had stated that they felt that if we're behind, we should go forward, and if we waited for them to make the decision, that would push out the 90 days out several days more. So revenue will start coming into them in month 2 instead of, I guess, probably something like month 5 or so. And so they requested that we go ahead and deal with it in this commission, as opposed to waiting for the next commission. And so we took that as a walk-on. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So, are these the only 2 that need to be addressed?
The short answer to that is no. There are several others that we could potentially take a look at, but I would consider these the low-hanging fruit, ones that have the most discrepancy in the percentage of the right-of-way fee currently. So the other ones that we might take a look at another time, the value is a little bit less, and so these 2 in particular, with the franchise fee review study that was done, were ones that I believed we needed to take action on quickly, because if you do the math at $500,000 a year, it's roughly almost $10,000 a week to delay. So some of the other ones are not near that impactful.
And you discovered these through, going through the process and taking inventory of all this. So good job. You're doing a good job.
Yeah, he's just trying to justify his job. That's all he's doing.
Well, yeah, we started this whole process, so it's nice to, have it.
Mayor, I would like to say, though, that I don't think the timing is ideal, because ordinarily we would not add an item on the same day. We did have time to amend the agenda today, but there could be some folks that want to object, or, I got an email also from Northwest Natural while the meeting was going on tonight, and their franchise, I believe, originally was 45 days, and I communicated with their government affairs director that they would prefer 90, so we made that change here tonight.
So section 5, it's both of them read 90 days.
Okay. I mean, if somebody wants to postpone this to the next meeting or leave it to the next commission, we could do so. But.
Well,
Can we speak in order?
Yes, we can speak in order as soon as they get off the sheet and find out what the order is. Commissioner Robb.
Okay. I want to just expound on what David was saying. Is I'm not going to vote against this, but I'm uncomfortable with this not being noticed. So I think that.
Oh, it was noticed. We got it just barely in time to publish a change in the agenda rather than walk it on.
Right, but don't we have
But
to notice
that's a couple
7
hours
days?
difference.
Yeah, it was hours notice.
Yeah, we usually, our normal agenda, we would have it out 3 or 4 days
Right.
ahead of time, and we
Right.
didn't have time to do that today.
So that's my problem with it.
Commissioner Moon.
Well, that's one of my concerns. The other concern I have is this is going to be passed on to our citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, I have to say, we have not been doing our due diligence with raising rates and looking at all these things on a regular basis and making sure everything goes up by at least 3%. Since I've sat on this commission, I've preached 3% because you have to keep up with inflation. Everything's going to cost more. So once again, here we sat. And my issue is the noticing, people have not been notified. A couple of hours, I know, is legal. I don't feel it's responsible.
Okay. Anything else from the commission?
Yes, I'm on there again.
Oh, okay.
Just following up on
Commissioner Roth.
Following up on Betty, I'd like to know how much we have increased utility bills in this last year for the citizens, because we're looking at water, we're looking at all kinds of utilities, and so it's 75 cents here, $20 there, whatever.
Well, in the other, in the presentation, because parks maintenance has been up, I noticed that was there. I get that. We do need money in parks. So if we approve this, where's this money going to go? Is it going to go into the general fund? Is it going to fall in the black hole? I don't know.
That's the decision of the next commission.
So they will get a chance to
Oh, yeah.
discuss
I
it
mean,
at
this-
their
the
budget
budget
meeting.
process and in their goal setting. Yeah.
Well, there's some obvious things that you need money for that you haven't been able to fix in the last 5 years at least, and one of them
Well, I
is,
totally agree with you.
deferred.
You're preaching
Right.
to the choir.
Right,
But I
okay.
would like to know, where is this money stream going to go?
Yeah, and that's completely up to the next commission. Staff would have recommendations for you at your retreat, but that would be sorted out there. Then we would write a budget according to the direction from the retreat, and then the budget committee would be up to them to.
Not our retreat.
Not our retreat, yes. You're right. But I might still be there. I might still be there.
I also want to illuminate that not only do Northwest Natural and PG, we notify all the ratepayers. That includes school districts, businesses. Everybody gets notified. It is 1% for one of these and 1.5 on the other one. So if you've got a $50 utility bill, it's 75 cents on one and 50 cents on the other one. But those bills are bigger for bigger users, so depending on the size of the user.
So if you're a business, you're going to be paying.
And everyone will receive a letter from PGE, and they explain on there that's, I think PGE's language is, we call it a right-of-way usage fee. I think that's what Northwest Natural would call it. PGE will call it a privilege tax or something like that. They have their own language that they use. So people will get notified. I mean, that's legally required that they receive that notice, and I think it's important for you to realize they're going to get those letters. And some of them, it will seem like an insignificant amount. Others might not feel that way, and so your phone could ring and so could mine. So I think it's important to realize that letter is part of the process.
Anything else from the commission? William Gifford, and after that, Amber Hobeck. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Lance.
All this is wasting time.
Now, come on now.
Mr. Mayor, City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford, and I live in Oregon City. I'm not speaking for any particular organization, because this happened sort of all of a sudden.
Yes.
Not sort of, it happened all of a sudden. Yes. But I do refer to the experience that I have as a member of the Government Economic Affairs Committee with the Chamber of Commerce, as president of the Oregon City Business Alliance, as a member of the Budget Committee, of the city's Budget Committee. There are some things about this that are a little unconventional. I agree with Commissioner Roth that I'm a little uncomfortable about how this is not happening with advance notice. But I'll say this particularly, just my personal opinion, I am even more uncomfortable, vastly more uncomfortable, at kicking the can down the road any more than we have. Commissioner Mumm is talking about how she preaches frequently about us not keeping up with inflation, and here's an opportunity to do something about it. The amount of money we're talking about in aggregate is substantial. The potential that good that this can be done to the city is cannot be understated. It's significant. It's significant. The impact that it has on an individual citizen, pretty small. The impact that it's going to have on a business is going to vary, of course, depending on the size of the business. What I particularly like about it is that there's no favoritism. Everybody is going to be impacted by this. Churches, government agencies, nonprofits, everybody is going to feel this the same, and I like the equanimity of that. I like the fact that it is spread across, that it's not targeting a particular industry, a particular individual, or a particular business. This is money that can significantly help our city. My suspicion is it's going to happen one way or the other. There's not going to be a vocal outrage of people saying, I don't want my electric bill to go up 75 cents. There's not going to be that kind of an outrage. And so if it's going to happen sooner or later, I would just ask you to really seriously consider how much money the city would be losing and put it in context of how much money we have lost since whenever that last rate adjustment was made.
72.
It's a lot.
That's a long time.
It's a long time.
It's a lot of money.
And I'm just suggesting that we don't wait any longer to get this fixed.
If I might.
Sorry, my time is
I
up.
was just going to, no, that's all right. I was just going to specifically, no, I mean, normally I don't do this, but the point is the PGE's electric bills probably have gone up in that time, and the 3% has resulted
Yes.
in additional income. It's not that we've been having a flat amount of money coming in, just for that clarification. Member Holbeck.
Good evening, City Commission. I'm Amber Holbeck. I do serve as the Executive Director for the Oregon City Chamber, and I'm a resident just outside of city limits. And I'm here just tonight to express I am disappointed that there was a couple hours notice. And, especially when it's a resolution dealing with an increase. Whether or not chamber executives and other people, other ratepayers should feel that we have the opportunity to weigh in on something like this, whether that is our right, our expectation, it is what I am feeling, and there are likely others that will feel the same. I'm used to an accepted traditional procedure of a couple, 3 days prior, we see the agenda, and we can gear up for it.
Yeah.
When it's an issue of an emergency, you will find me supportive, and I will be here to support that effort. I don't see the emergency that you couldn't wait 2 weeks to the next commission meeting. No offense, William.
None
But
taken.
2 weeks to give just a little bit more notice.
This thing doesn't work.
I'll entertain a motion for a continuance. It wouldn't be really a continuance, I guess, but does somebody want
To table it.
to table it?
For the next meeting.
I will move to do that.
I've got a motion from Commissioner Roth and not ahead of Commissioner Pauley. Vote, please. Unanimous? Thank you. Thank you for spending all this time with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. That's greatly appreciated.
Thank you for coming.
And with that, then do we have a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve consent agenda.
Moved by Commissioner Mum, seconded by Commissioner Roth. Vote, please. Unanimous. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we've had an active couple of weeks, and some of these things have sort of, I think, surprised my staff and I want to thank John Lewis for being stalwart in attending some of the regional transportation discussions that have been going on with a task force that I didn't know anything about until a few days ago. What has happened is that the mayors of Oregon City, Oregon City, Wilsonville, and Lake Oswego, I think those are the three largest cities in Clackamas County, got together a few days ago and talked about the process that C4 and the Oregon Department of Transportation were using in this task force model to talk about forming a Transportation Act, which is a committee that has a lot of influence in recommending to ODOT how transportation dollars get allocated in the region. And John was attending those meetings and then alerted me to some information about what was happening there, and then I shared that with the mayor, and then the next thing I know, other mayors were also having concerns. In fact, I think the mayor of Wilsonville was at those meetings and expressed his concerns at the meetings. So the mayors have asked us to prepare a document. I have a draft here. I don't know if this is the final because there were like 10 of these flashing over the email today. So I'm just going to hand these out. I also emailed you a version earlier this afternoon. That emailed version I sent you was updated once again after that as I was on my way down here for the meeting. So I know that the version I emailed you, and probably this one, has had a few minor adjustments. But basically the concern was that the model that was emerging seemed, I think the phrase John used was solution by dilution. What was happening was that the influence and the voices of the largest cities in the county was being equated to the same vote and the same degree of influence as a water district with a few hundred customers or a city with 1,000 residents. And so there wasn't the kind of representation that you would see per capita or based on road miles served. And so the cities were feeling, the larger cities, and particularly metro cities, felt like they really weren't being heard. And so they've come up with this proposal for some changes, and I'm going to pass that out because I want you to be aware of it, and as well. And
this is a very important issue.
Before you go to the next item, I think Betty and I probably would want to make some comments.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I would really encourage anybody who, I mean, this is a huge issue. It's the ACT, Area on Transportation. These people have been meeting, and the way that it's being structured of who gets the votes and who doesn't, and who's appointed and who doesn't, is what really is a concern to myself. I'll let you.
John Lewis and I attended the task force meeting. No public comments were permitted. It was among the task force members. Certain of the counties had mayor representatives. Clackamas County does not have one. But one of the things that was there and discussed was having a selection of three, besides an identified county commission position and a mayor's position, to having three stakeholder positions. And it was written. It was written in the presentation that was there that the three positions would be selected by C4. Commissioner Sabas, who's the county representative, wanted to change that to 4, wanted to include a business rep, and wanted to drop selected by C4. The implication is that the Board of County Commissioners would make the selection. Fortunately, Mayor Doyle, as the mayor from Washington County, stated that their comparable organization would not support the county commission making the selection, that the body that's comparable to C4 would do it, and the Washington County commissioner that was there was nodding in agreement. Commissioner Savas says, well, maybe C4 can select the three stakeholders, but the Board of County Commissioners select the business. And I started to think, where's the business representatives? Well, I think oftentimes we know we're industrial land short here. Well, Wilsonville, of course, has developing industrial land, and I'm sure they would have some ideas of who might be a good stakeholder representative. Yes. Canby is doing very well in its development. Though it's a small city. Yes. They might have some suggestions. A rural city may have some suggestions in terms of who might be a ag business representative that could serve on that committee. And I actually prepared a memo to send out, and I took it to this meeting that we had there. And they thought, well, I kind of wanted to end up being kind of a badass and send this memo out to everybody, and they thought, well, that was a bit harsh. But one of the things the point I made is, it's no wonder that Washington County does so well in industrial development, where it has its city commissioners and its county commissioners working in unison for that kind of industrial development. And it's not surprising that they do so well, and we don't do so well when we don't have a united front in these areas, and that's what's so critical.
Yeah.
So I think this is from Tim Knapp, is it? Is this
From the three.
The three of you guys.
It's from the three of us. Oh, okay. Well, I haven't read it yet either, but in any case,
Well, I think
it's from apparently it's from me, and it's a draft, and that's fine. I think Wilsonville took probably the initiative in developing this draft. They rejected my memo. So with that,
I think the important part is transportation monies are drying up from federal and state and other places, and everybody's fighting over the last nickel, and this could go, maybe the act is the right way to go, but how people are selected, the process is the important piece. Because the money, everybody has to have a chance to get into that money, whatever that money is.
Our understanding is that ODOT requires consensus. So if cities, especially the three largest cities in the region, don't concur with this, I don't think it's probably going to happen the way, at least the way it was contemplated before the mayors got together. So.
And it could be an act is the right thing to do. I don't know, but the process.
And
selection.
what's so irritating about what happened? C4 has been discussing this for some time. C4 made no recommendations.
No.
But we were going to have a retreat, as we do almost every year. I had anticipated this would have been a major topic at the retreat.
Yes.
The co-chairs canceled the retreat without giving any explanation why.
Mayor, can I move on with my
Yeah,
report?
I'm sorry. I had a vent.
Well, I
We could
understand.
go on about the act for a long time.
Well, we're going to try to make sure that there's a reasonable representation, and I'm glad that the mayors are engaged in that discussion. So I also want to mention that we were talking earlier tonight about right-of-way, and there's been a landmark decision that came out from the city of Eugene. They're really the leader in right-of-way management in the state, and they've been a tremendous resource for us, helping us along the way as kind of the big brother and doing best practices, and they're still leading the way, and they recently won a major court decision at the Oregon Court of Appeals on their they were charging right-of-way usage fees for internet services, and I just wanted to, I have copies here for you guys, and I wanted to make sure that you saw that, and none other than Nancy Warner is their attorney, which is also our attorney. And then finally, I've been getting a few complaints over the last year and a half about our noise ordinance. As you know, our current noise ordinance is extremely general, and cities take a couple of different approaches. They either take a very general approach and have a noise ordinance that says no unreasonable noise at an unreasonable hour. And then officers of the law and the court system and the judges are all trying to figure out, well,
What does that mean?
what does reasonable mean? And, Ed and I can figure it out probably, but we would be we would be the only people. So it ends up being a very difficult enforcement tool, and I think probably this is something that the more generic approach is the one Oregon City inherited, because many years ago we had mills. They were the primary source of income for residents. People worked there. Of course, the steam whistle went off at 6 a.m. and everybody said, okay, we're used to that. And we had railroads and all these other things happening in Oregon City, and it was a bustling, kind of noisy place, and we all adjusted to it. Well, as the city growed and matured and changed, and I think grew significantly, the ordinance hasn't changed really with the times. And so I'm hearing some complaints. I have concerns about the fact that we don't have the resources to develop, have a sound engineer. And like Portland has a person who's got an engineering degree in sound management, and this person has a 25-page ordinance, all kinds of little devices and gizmos to go around and measure it, and that person is very, very busy, because I think Portland used to have 4 or 5 of these folks, and through budget cuts, they're down to 1, but the demand for that person's time has not gone down. So we're trying to figure out how can we adopt a hybrid ordinance of some kind that would let us keep the reasonable person standard, but also give our officers a little bit more to work with in terms of we may have to buy some devices to measure decibels. Those may be issued to supervisors. We have to work through all that. But we have started having discussions with some residents who've complained, and we're going to have more discussions in the future about that. So it may take 60 days or so to come up with some recommendations for the commission. That'll be the next commission, so at least 2 of you will be here to enjoy that. And then the next thing I wanted to mention is Oregon City is part of an optional flood insurance program that our Public Works Department, and really primarily it's Kathy Griffin in the Public Works Department, works tirelessly on this thing, filling out all these reports. I mean, she spends a lot of time on this thing. And what it does, though, is it allows our residents in our flood zones in the city to get a reduction in their flood insurance of up to 15%. And Kathy has done it once again, and I really appreciate her effort, and I just wanted to make mention of it. I can give you a lot more information about it. This got renewed last year as well. You might recall that.
Yes.
But we have been a successful applicant again in getting that 15% discount for our residents, and I just
Good.
wanted to acknowledge John and also Kathy for their work on that program.
That's awesome.
David, could I just say one short thing?
You go ahead.
The issue isn't about acknowledgement as much as it is about education. So the main reason why we asked that it come here was because the program also requires that we inform our city commission, inform the public the best we can. So we've got flyers, we've got website. We wanted to bring it to you just as a public education measure.
Yeah, we should be advertising that.
So if you have any questions about it, let me know, because we have lots and lots of details about it. And that concludes my report, Your Honor.
Thank you. A bit of reflection, but
Excuse me, I missed one thing
Okay.
that I was passed to me. Remember the developer forum that I
Yes.
sent you an email about,
Yes.
and Eric was whispering in my ear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you illuminate on that?
Sure, yeah, I just wanted to describe it a little bit more. The developer forums is the first of its kind that economic development's had here in Oregon City. It will happen on the 12th of November, next Wednesday, from 11 to 1. It's intended to be an open dialogue between the city and the development community. We hope to continue that to create a synergy there and open lines of communication. And it's also intended to be a very productive and positive discussion. So whereas if you come in with identification of room for improvement, then you're expected to provide a solution. So that's the way we're
nice.
going to do it, and hopefully get a lot of good feedback from the development community after that.
That's great.
That is great. Get specific details. So
Yeah.
we can fix what needs to be fixed.
And also highlight some of the positives too.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. That's all we have.
many months ago, the Metro Regional Government put forward a parks maintenance levy, and actually, it's I think a couple of years ago, and it was during our recession, and of course, the addition of a levy or any tax thing at that time was resulting in compression in some of our communities, and that decision, although the concept was being discussed at the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, where we have a seat, it was very much in the preliminary period, and the advice of the Metro Policy Advisory Committee was not sought, and it is one of the major reasons that triggered the regional mayors meetings that that I've been attending over the last 2 or so years, where all the mayors meet in Tualatin. The result was that Metro is a lot more sensitive to getting impact involved in these kinds of things, and we have these climate smart community initiatives coming forward that the Metro Regional Government is going to be looking at, and we've had many presentations on this, and we're having our second joint meeting on Friday morning with JPAC, the Joint Advisory Committee on Transportation, and the impact the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, where they'll get input from us as they have in a previous meeting. What I wanted to comment on is that I think under the leadership of Chair Hughes and the current Metro Commissioners, relations between the cities and the Metro Regional Government have improved dramatically over these last few years, and I'll be attending that particular meeting. Oftentimes when I attend meetings, I'll make reference to, but Oregon City has voter-approved annexations.
Oh, yes.
Most of the cities don't. And I pointed out to them, anytime I hear that, I say, look, we were passing them all until the recession hit. And
yeah,
then when the
right.
recession hit, virtually all of them were, even single-acre annexations were being approved. Well, remember the last batch before this last election, they all passed, many of them smaller. But what I thought was interesting is that and it was actually Mr. Conkle that pointed this out to me, that in the elections that occurred, more people voted on annexations than voted on any commission seat. And the annexation of 5 acres passed by over 2/3 of the vote.
Nice.
So I really think the issue that we had with voter-approved annexations was not an issue of anything but people seeing development stopping one through during the city recession and could not understand why we're going to annex additional land until the economy changed. And I think that's reflected in the opinions of the voters.
I agree.
So, Commissioner Paul, you want to say anything?
I have nothing.
You have nothing? Commissioner Roth?
Well, I was going to leave that for Doug, since Doug has a certain amount of time to talk, and I have
You're running out of time?
Jeez.
She's throwing you under the bus there.
We actually we had our first legacy meeting in Portland. Actually, what we did we visited and I didn't even know about it. The Directors Park. I'd never seen it. It's just a couple blocks west of the Multnomah County Main Branch Library. And a very interesting discussion of how those things evolved there, the issues that came up, the ideas that they had, the things that worked, the things that haven't worked so well. They're all combined. And I think the intent of that was to show the development process they went through, tremendous commitment, particularly on the part of Moyer to donate money to the development of that particular site. It's a site that's connected with the businesses that are around it and triggering additional development of businesses around it, and it's becoming a central feature. That park is not particularly related to our public access or public entities that we had, but the process that they had gone through, I think, was a very interesting one. They talked about the good decisions and the bad decisions that were made. But it was kind of interesting. We were standing in this park, and apparently that's a park block, but there are no curves. It's a continuous with the buildings that are around, the blocks that are around it. But then they're informed how many floors of parking below it?
I believe it's, six.
Six floors of parking below it, and you wouldn't be aware of that factor at all. That was apparently a requirement that Moyers put on in terms of the monies he put forward to develop the park itself. And then we went on to our first Portland meeting, which we held there at the library itself.
I'll add. Can I add one thing?
Yeah,
No, you already said you didn't have anything.
So there were some, even though it's very, very different from our project, there were some interesting takeaways, and one of them I thought you, Betty, was maintenance. Thinking about maintenance as you build it, because they said that's one thing that they would have done a little differently, is they didn't think about where they were going to store the dumpsters and where they were going to store the equipment, and making sure that you have enough space and planning to where all that's going to be stored and positioned in order to maintain that, because it's a lot of maintenance.
Yeah.
So, and also the materials that you use, I think, is very important too. Their materials kind of porous and had a lot of maintenance issues. So it's really important to think long term.
Yes.
Commissioner Rock.
I thought it was pretty interesting, David, talking about the nuisance person. We just got our budget bumps today, and so we get another one of those nuisance noise people. Plus, the commission just gave us $100,000 for equipment. So.
Well, we're going to be trying to get a 1 or 2 page ordinance from the 25-page one that you have, because we just don't have the kind of technical folks that we would have to have for that. So,
Yeah.
but it's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Good luck.
And then the other thing is, I had a meeting yesterday with Scott Burns, and he's going to be providing me with a matrix that I saw a year and a half ago that is a very, very detailed matrix as far as soils conditions. And so it goes beyond what the Dogami and the LiDAR maps, the LiDAR and the SLiDAR maps are, but does conditions of, looks at individual parcels of soil in different areas all around the metro region. So he's going to be getting that to me sometime pretty soon. So.
Commissioner Mum.
I got nothing.
Well, that's what Carol Polley said. and then she edited what she
Go ahead,
just
Rocky.
made
I'll
up.
edit what you say.
Just a few heritage meetings and tourism meetings, but I think I'll update you on that next meeting. And but I have a whole bunch of other things to
That was not me, by the way.
I just wanted to say Jonathan's already left, but the trick or treat on Main Street, awesome.
That was awesome.
It gets better every year. It was a lot of fun. I think most of us were down there. The police department was down there. A lot of people. Were really cool. Really cool event. Was great.
Can I say one thing about it? Chief Band is not here, but Wendy
Yeah.
Lipke was down
That was
there.
great.
Yes.
With a baby.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. The spirit down there was great.
Yeah.
A lot of people. The weather really cooperated. And it was great to see the police cars there at Liberty Plaza.
That's cool.
Just communicating with the public and being there and having Wendy there with the baby. Anyway, it was great. It was great.
Mayor, I just received an email a few minutes ago from Annette Madsen from PGE.
Yes.
She is contesting the information we have from LOC, says other cities also receive 3.5%, and I don't know how many do, but there were 44 cities in the survey, so we'll have lots of time now to dispute the facts and so forth, but the bottom line is we haven't made adjustments to those fees in many, many years.
Since 72, they have to go
Yeah.
up.
Okay,
You're right.
thank you.
Return?